In this world, people are born with special crosses on their palms. The fourth cross is considered the best for close combat, granting its owner immense strength and speed. The third cross specializes in powerful mid-range magic, while the second cross dominates long-range combat with devastating attacks. However, the first cross is considered the weakest. It's only suitable for creating artifacts and is almost useless in battle. This is the cross our protagonist was born with. But the young man decided to prove that even the first cross could crush enemies. Using his artifacts, he activated a meteorite core. After a short incantation, the sky blazed so brightly it looked as if a second sun had ignited above the world. Then a rain of meteorites crashed down to Earth. The explosion was so powerful it could be seen even from space. Nothing was left of the island, but Guy was still dissatisfied as such an attack required lengthy preparation. His true goal lies far beyond the human world, where divine beasts reside. Their power is so immense that human magic seems like child's play in comparison. That's why Guy continues to grow stronger, hoping to one day challenge these creatures. To become stronger, Guy could study the magic of the divine beasts. However, to do that, he would first need to defeat one of them. Another option was reincarnation into a more perfect body, though achieving that would be extremely difficult. But the most obvious path was to find reliable allies and increase his combat power. However, as soon as he spoke of his goal or faced danger, all his companions would immediately disappear. Then Guy wondered, do his allies necessarily have to be human? For example, dragons are much stronger and more loyal than many people. Meanwhile, deep within the caves, one of the dragons was addressing his kin. He declared that it was time for dragons to avenge humanity for the destruction of their race 100 years ago by a man named Guy. But suddenly, an uninvited guest fell from above and knocked out the dragon leader with a single blow. Seeing him, the dragons froze in terror. Standing before them was Guy himself, the man they had believed dead for an entire century. Guy merely smirked and calmly stated that he hadn't come there for a fight at all. But the dragons still didn't trust Guy. When they heard he was looking for a dragon partner, they only grew angrier. At that moment, the dragon leader regained consciousness and immediately attacked the hero with his strongest breath. A giant stream of fire erupted from his mouth, destroying everything in its path. Believing he had won, the dragon began to mock the human, but suddenly, Guy calmly walked out of the flames, completely unharmed. Looking at the dragons, the hero explained that dragon's breath was just a complex magical formula, and if you knew its weak point, such an attack could be easily dispelled. These words left the dragons utterly speechless. However, due to the rule of energy, the fire dissipated, but the magical flow didn't vanish. So, the young man's final step was to redirect the magic and counterattack his opponent. Guy managed to repel the assault, using the entire stream of fire and magic against its creator. A loud cry of pain echoed throughout the cave. The blow was so powerful that the dragon leader simply burned to death, but the guy didn't even glance at his former enemy, or rather at his ashes, and walked away from the crowd. The other creatures merely stared in shock at the charred bones of their kin. But then, one of the dragons, appearing older than the rest, began to speak about the theory of dragon flame. He fully grasped Guy's unique magical method of hunting dragons. But the guy simply interrupted him, returning to the topic of how and where to find the strongest dragon willing to become his companion. Having killed their informant, he suggested they appoint another so the dragons wouldn't meet the same fate as their leader. With wide eyes, the dragons stared in horror at the human they had despised moments ago. Suddenly, the elder dragon decided to reveal that there was a temple north of this cave. In that very place lived a dragon named Dragon of Darkness. Intrigued, Guy turned and moved closer to the dragon, speaking to him. In a childlike manner, he asked for more and more information about the strongest dragon. As it turned out, this was a dragon greedy for jewels and gems. He was willing to protect and help humans in exchange for them, and as rumors said, if he weren't so strong, he wouldn't be alive. But the main character understood the subtext hidden in the elder dragon's words. He was asking to kill the black dragon, that's how strong he was. But Guy hadn't said he was looking for a partner and ally. Even if the dragons knew this, the information received wouldn't have changed. Hearing the answer, the guy simply turned around, uttering words of gratitude. His black cloak billowed behind him as the dragons watched him leave. But creatures as proud as they were couldn't forget their dishonored pride. The winged beasts joined forces and decided to unleash magical dragon flame in a single volley. It seemed impossible to escape such a powerful and coordinated attack, and so a stream of mana surged directly towards Guy's back. The jubilant dragons believed that all their magical powers spent on this backstab were not in vain and that the main character had been defeated. Mocking laughter echoed off the cave walls. The dragon pack praised themselves and their cleverness, having simply deceived the human who had terrorized their kind 100 years ago. Having killed the guy, the dragons decided that nothing in the world could stop them now. But then the thick smoke and fog cleared, and as if nothing had happened, the hero emerged from it, whole and unharmed. By so easily declaring him dead, the dragons had signed their own death warrant, and Guy had warned them when he killed their previous leader. The dragon's jaws dropped in utter astonishment. Guy just thought to himself how clueless these arrogant creatures were, unable to recognize the power of his magic. He honestly wanted to leave them alone, but their attitude towards him was unacceptable. He opened his subspace and pulled out a small gemstone. Deciding to explain the secret of his resilience to the dragons one last time, the protagonist revealed that he was quite difficult to kill with just that kind of magic. Now, he would show them exactly how to kill their opponents. The raw mana stone in the hero's hands couldn't be used as an artifact, but once completely filled with power, the small stone would no longer be able to contain the strong flow of magic directed into it by the protagonist. However, if combined with the spell inside the stone, the destruction would be contained by the power of the bond. This delicate mastery was only possible for those who possessed the first cross. As a result, the magical energy wouldn't disappear but would instead seek an exit, becoming a deadly weapon. The hero pondered this theory as he approached the dragon remains. Even on the verge of death, they couldn't understand what the hero was doing, trying in vain to stop him. Gathering their remaining strength, they decided to unleash another volley of magic. But at that moment, the mana stone in the hero's hands couldn't withstand the pressure, tearing apart under the accumulated magic within it. With a sarcastic farewell to the dragons, Guy threw the stone towards the lizards, and no one could stop the explosion and its aftermath. A bright flash emitted by the stone incinerated everything in its path, leaving not even ash from the creatures who considered themselves the pinnacle of the world. The shockwave from the explosion was too powerful, destroying the mountaintop where the cave was located and blasting a huge hole in its ceiling. The only dragon left intact was the elder dragon. He lay sprawled on the ground before the protagonist. Guy hovered in the sky, observing the destruction and slowly levitating closer to the creature. In reality, the young man simply took pity on him for the information he had provided earlier about the Black Dragon of Darkness. As he prepared to leave, the hero advised him not to try any tricks if he still valued his life. Just like that, without even looking back, the protagonist shot off like a comet in search of the Black Dragon of Darkness who resided in the north. The elder could only watch him go, powerless to do anything amidst the devastation. The moon illuminated the dark sky, appearing directly in front of a majestic castle situated right on a cliff. Flying closer, the protagonist found enormous gates beyond which lay the dragon and its treasury. Hoping he wouldn't have to waste time killing more dragons, especially powerful ones, Guy prepared to push the door open to proceed. Before he could open the door, a dragon's roar echoed, asking what Guy was doing at its treasury. The protagonist, completely unfazed, stated that he was looking for a dragon that fulfilled requests in exchange for treasures. A momentary silence from the dragon filled the room. Then the gates swung open, revealing to the hero a sight of mountains of gold, chests, and jewels inside. After weighing everything, the dragon allowed him to pass through. Indeed, on mountains of gold coins and jewels lay a dragon the size of a castle. Addressing Guy arrogantly, the Dragon of Darkness wanted to know his wish and the payment for it. An ordinary person would have trembled with fear, but the hero simply offered to become his companion, accompanying him on his journey. They could discuss the price for such a service right then. The dragon didn't expect such an offer, so the hero continued to explain his ideas and aspirations. He was even willing to provide equipment and make the dragon stronger if it agreed to fight for him. An awkward silence fell between them as Guy asked for the Dragon of Darkness's consent to such a proposal. A loud laugh erupted from the lizard's maw as it scoffed at the very idea of becoming a companion to the pathetic human standing before it. At the offer to make him stronger, it laughed even harder, remarking that humans were more modest than he had thought. In response, the hero simply bent in half, thanking him for the compliment. But this gesture only angered the dark dragon, who stomped the ground and declared that he hadn't complimented the hero. Guy stared at him, confused. The dragon told the pathetic human not to get ahead of himself as he only helped people for a reward. If the young man continued speaking in that tone, he would only be inviting his own death. Deep in thought, the young man realized that the dragon's participation in the adventure depended entirely on the reward. The dark dragon explained that he and his kin, especially those greedy for profit, would only work with humans for a worthy payment, but such a payment was nowhere to be found in this world. However, that only seemed to be the case to the dragon, as Guy, with a bored expression, pulled a glowing stone from his subspace inventory. Holding it out, the protagonist's face twisted into a satisfied smirk, showing the dragon before him a stone of extraordinary beauty and radiance. The stone in his hands was extremely valuable among dragons, but did such a young dragon know about it? The protagonist had no idea. The winged lizard first looked at the stone in confusion, but then realization dawned on him. He was astonished by the stone in the hero's hands, unable to believe that he had actually managed to obtain it. It was the heart of the strongest dragon who had terrorized both humans and dragons for many years. About 150 years ago, he was defeated, and the most powerful bloodstone, the Dragon Slayer's stone, was extracted from his chest. But that stone was taken by the very slayer of the evil dragon king Diablos, and that meant the human before him was none other than Guy himself, the dragon slayer. The protagonist confirmed the young dark dragon's suspicions. He even offered to explain exactly how he managed it. The dragon froze in astonishment, but the hero continued his story about how he had tried to spare Diablos. But the dragon was weaker than Guy had anticipated, and so killing him turned out to be surprisingly easy. Now, for the last time, the young man offered to become his companion. The dragon had better agree, because if he refused, Guy would become the owner of a second mana stone from the chest of the strongest dragon. Resisting to the very end, the arrogant creature tried to defend his honor and not bow his head before a human. He decided to attack Guy. The attack was sudden, fast, but not well thought out. Ready for the fight, the young man wondered why the dragon had refused such a good deal, as they could have come to an agreement. Well, if that was the case, he would try not to kill him, but the dragon also had to do everything possible not to fall by the protagonist's hand. But something happened that Guy could never have expected. The great black dark dragon, living in the far north, simply prostrated himself before him, tearfully begging for forgiveness. The young lizard burst into hysterics, pleading not to be killed, promising he would no longer be arrogant, just so his life would be spared. The young man simply exhaled tiredly, setting up a barrier around himself. The hysteria was so intense that the castle simply began to collapse, destroying the foundation of the cliff on which it stood. And in a few moments, the castle turned to dust. Even Guy himself was amazed by the extent of the destruction and the power of the young dragon. Indeed, only stones and dust remained of the building. Tired of the tantrum, the young man tried to remind the dragon that he wouldn't hurt him if he just agreed. A positive response quickly followed. The dragon couldn't believe he was still alive. Gathering his courage, he asked Guy why he spared him and not Diablos. In response, the hero simply stated that he would one day surpass the Dragon King. His new companion was shocked by such confidence, but Guy was concerned about something else entirely. Could he turn the dragon into a human? Traveling in human form would be much more convenient, and her powers would remain intact. Hearing her agreement, Guy immediately got to work. The transformation began, and in just a moment, a small girl stood before him instead of a massive dragon. However, she knew absolutely nothing about human life. Guy had to find clothes for her, and then it turned out she couldn't even dress herself. That's when the hero finally realized how young the dark dragon truly was. From that day on, Guy had his first student. After putting on her new clothes, the girl finally introduced herself. Her name was Iris, the northern dark dragon. All that remained was to find her a weapon. Guy pulled out a magic staff perfectly suited for her new body. He proudly began to praise its characteristics, calling the staff a true masterpiece. But no sooner had he finished than Iris smashed the precious staff against the castle ruins, and no matter how many times Guy repaired it, the girl broke it again and again. Guy gave up, covering the weapon with a thin layer of durable magical metal. This metal would stop the dragon from constantly bending and destroying the staff, making it completely unbendable. Iris immediately started hitting everything around her with the staff, delighted that it was now stronger. Resigned, the young man just clutched himself in pain and resentment, as such a barbaric method had stripped the staff of all its beauty and elegance. But his heavy thoughts were interrupted by a device on his belt that began to ring loudly. The hero reached for it, trying to remember when he might have turned it on. Distracted from her new weapon, the little girl asked what exactly was hanging from Guy's pants belt. It was a magical device, a monster detector. If a powerful demon was nearby, the artifact would start ringing, warning its owner. Also, by pressing a button, the magical tool would guide you to the demon. As it turned out, the main character had been killing powerful demons for many years, so long that it had become tiresome. So now the device only reacted to enemies on the level of Diablos. And that meant, yes, someone was definitely nearby. And that meant the first lesson for Guy the teacher and his student Iris in exterminating powerful opponents had arrived. But Iris hesitated, hearing the main character's joyful chatter, as people usually weren't happy about this. But he simply dismissed her concern, heading in the direction the artifact indicated. Only then did Guy realize that the dragon continued to move on all fours with the staff held between her teeth. It wasn't his place to judge how she was comfortable, so he decided Iris would be an element of surprise. At the same time, a group of warriors was preparing for battle against a powerful opponent, an 8th-class ogre lord. A quantum blast spell flew from the girl's lips, hitting several opponents in front of her. A representative of the 4th Cross rushed onto the battlefield with a heavy sword in hand, asking her not to take all the glory for herself. A pair of warriors emerged from the smoke. The guy and girl belonged to a Class 11 group, and for them, today's opponents were nothing more than toys. It's no wonder Uriel, the Witch of Doom, and Reiter, the demigod of the blade, are known as the strongest fighters in the kingdom. On the outskirts of the kingdom of Meyers, children were playing hide-and-seek, but one of the kids got distracted by a dark figure turning the corner of a house. Thinking it was one of his friends, he decided to scare the person around the corner, but this creature was clearly not human. The creature had an axe in its hands and was enormous. The child's heart froze with fear. A group of soldiers wandered through the town, searching for survivors after the ogre attack. But everyone who managed to escape had already left. Chances were slim, with dismembered bodies lying everywhere on the ground. The commander pondered what to do next when a large object eclipsed the sun above him. A giant ogre holding a piece of a tree like a toothpick was smashing everything around it. Suddenly, the giant decided to turn its attention to the crowd of people below. The ogre's size made it obvious that it belonged to Class 8 or higher in terms of strength. The soldiers took up defensive positions, realizing that fighting a Class 8 opponent would be tough. And then the ogre leader delivered a precise strike, cleaving the soldiers in half. The battlefield became a bloodbath in a matter of moments. Of the soldiers who had bravely fought just before, not a single living spot remained on their bodies, and all this with one blow. Those who weren't on the front line were unharmed, but seeing the death of their comrades completely shattered the squad's morale. But the commander ordered them not to retreat. They were humanity's last line of defense. At this moment, the ogre raised its club for the next strike. But someone managed to shoot it in the back with magic. A girl with a bow and arrows imbued with powerful mana shouted incantations, trying to hold back the ogre's assault. Realizing the ogre hadn't expected such an attack, the girl called out Kaido's name. Disoriented, the ogre swayed from side to side. At the same time, a young man rushed at it from the side, carrying a heavy weapon, and sliced the monster into pieces. With his cloak billowing, the guy took the monster's life with a single swing of his sword. After he cut it into pieces, the monster's corpse simply fell in the square, right in front of the warriors whose lives it had tried to take just moments before. The two people who killed it were adventurers who had agreed to help the town in such a difficult situation. Just two people managed to stop the rising death toll in a matter of seconds. Approaching the battlefield, a girl in a healer's outfit used healing magic. Everyone who had fought regained their strength and healed the minor and serious wounds left on them by the battlefield. A sweet girl with beautiful wavy hair and such kind eyes approached the crowd of soldiers. She sincerely asked if they were okay and if there were any other soldiers with serious wounds that required further treatment. Standing back to back, a new group of adventurers appeared before the crowd. A team of 3 easily defeated the Class 8 ogre. Holy Knoll, the magic swordsman Kaido, and the magic bow specialist Basil, each of them had reached Class 10. The squad commander personally approached the Class 10 adventurers to thank them for their quick and coordinated work. Without their help, the squad definitely wouldn't have made it. But then, a new enemy appeared. The adventurers, however, said they would take care of the monster behind the group. Preparing for a new fight, the trio of adventurers took their combat stances. But they weren't just facing one Class 8 ogre, they were up against an entire horde. No matter how strong they were, 3 of them couldn't handle so many monsters. The glimmer of hope the soldiers had just found quickly vanished from their eyes. They knew how strong and monstrous ogres were, especially when there were several of them. But then, an electric current erupted in the air. A quantum blast attack swept through the area, striking down everything in its path. Both the adventurers and the soldiers were left speechless when they saw it. Uriel, the Witch of Doom, had arrived to help, being the kingdom's strongest mage. Uriel Abendroth, a recognized Class 11 mage, defeated all the enemies with a single magical spell. The ogres' bodies, struck by lightning, lay scattered across the rooftops. The sheer number of high-level monsters had forced the king to give her the order to eradicate everything around. Realizing that magic was definitely involved, she had been tracking its traces and heading towards the epicenter. As she landed in the town square, the soldiers parted, recognizing who stood before them. But the moment the girl looked up, she saw a terrifying sight. An even larger ogre appeared in front of a building, ready to destroy everything around, possibly with just one blow. And he wasn't alone. A new group of lords, higher ogres, followed him. They were already moving towards the warriors, who began to flee from the threat. Uriel was also preparing to cast her spells as quickly and precisely as possible. But someone stopped her, asking her to leave a couple of monsters for him too. With just one sword strike, he cleaved the ogre in half, leaving it no chance. Then another and another. The guy was like a storm, rushing with his sword drawn, as if it wasn't a horde of lords but just toys. Pieces of monsters flew everywhere like trash. Guts, blood, everything around became a butcher's table for just one person. That was Reuter, known as the Demigod of the Blade. Covered in monster blood, he advised the soldiers on how not to run from a battle against a superior opponent. They just needed to understand that it was merely a monster. But these were the words of the kingdom's strongest Class 11 warriors. But now they had a more serious goal: to destroy the lone dragon that had taken the lives of 70,000 people and razed countless villages and towns. Only the 2 of them had been sent on this mission. A single dragon's breath is devastating. Countless countries have fallen to their barbaric attacks. But time has passed, and it has been 2 centuries since any of their cities were burned by these creatures. Now, however, no one knows exactly how to fight them. The only sage who hunted monsters, the ones responsible for entire countries disappearing, simply used them to practice his spells. But in Uriel's eyes, this man was a legend. If he truly existed, she wanted to meet him. The battle continues. More and more demons appear, their numbers showing no sign of decreasing. But this means everything is going according to plan. Gathering their strength, all the demons were slaughtered, and the road was drenched in the blood of their fallen enemies. Kaido was wounded, but Saint Noel is always ready to help with any injury. After recovering their strength, the powerful duo believes now is the best time to go on the offensive. Uriel turns around and tells the adventurers to leave, explaining that it will be too dangerous from now on. But they refuse to give up, each having their own reasons and goals for being there. Kaido insists that they won't be a burden to their seniors, and if they only get in the way, then abandoning them is the best option. They are ready to give their lives for this cause. Before he could finish speaking, a magical energy arrow pierces the magic swordsman's body. He dies instantly, the attack having struck his heart. He collapses to the ground, with none of his allies able to react in time. Uriel could only process that the attack was magical, which was highly unusual. And then 4 more projectiles followed, one after another. The arrows pierced the members of the dragon-slaying party. Only the Witch of Doom is fast enough to put up a block. The light beam spell is quick and easy to use, but it's usually too weak to kill a person, typically only blinding eyes or harming small animals. Yet it managed to strike down everyone, even Reuter, who shares the same power class as her. The battlefield is once again drenched in blood, but this time it's the blood of her comrades. Such power would require an insane amount of mana to be poured into each beam. Uriel realizes this is impossible for a human. This can only mean one thing: the opponent is not human but can use magic. She was lucky her barrier activated. Without it, she would have died too. There's no time to think, as the enemy is already before her. The Witch of Doom wants to know her opponent's name. Before the girl stands a creature in human form. There can be no mistake, he is the one they were meant to kill, the terror dragon Lymine. By appearing in his human form, the dragon showed the utmost disrespect to the girl. In this form, they are much weaker and cannot even use their strongest weapon, their breath. Realizing the girl was well-informed, he decided to continue speaking. Uriel was stalling for time, creating a complex magic circle to end the battle right here and now. The girl understood that time was running out, but a quick spell would be too weak to kill a dragon. So she started talking, drawing comet fall magic circles behind her back. Lymine simply spoke about how only pests could fall victim to his breath. But suddenly, the friendly atmosphere is interrupted by a deadly beam of light as he noticed the spell behind the Witch of Doom's back. Death awaited her as there was no time left to defend herself, but someone in front of her deflected the attack. No one expected the appearance of a third duelist, having thought everyone else was dead. Having recovered, Reiter began to help Uriel in this fight, giving her a chance to use complex, high-level attacks. The girl was overjoyed that her partner was safe and sound. Beams of healing magic emanated from him, but deciding not to pay attention, she was focused on the fight, aiming to cast the maximum number of spells in a short time. Reiter had already rushed into battle, putting on an amulet, or rather, a monster identifier. The girl's task was to attack at the right moment. The terror dragon Lymine isn't holding back either, drawing his sword for close quarters combat. They parry each other's blows, breathing down each other's necks. It seems Reiter starts to get the upper hand, but the enemy jumps back when the warrior aims for his neck. The dragon merely deflects the attack with a barrier spell, scoffing. Reiter is surprised but ready for this turn of events, drawing his dual swords to speed up his attacks. Lymine tries to dodge, but the attack lands, leaving no scratch. Reiter starts fighting seriously and prepares for another attack as his opponent is now open. Only now does the terror dragon understand what the swordsman meant. Looking up, he sees a comet of fire and flame hurtling towards him. Uriel managed to cast the complex spell. There was enough time after all. A powerful shockwave from the explosion began to knock back the allies fighting against the dragon. The force was so immense that nothing living remained of their previous battlefield. Hoping it's all over and that there was no chance to dodge, the heroes approach the dust cloud. They see Lymine emerge from the mist, half of his body simply torn off. He screams in horror that Comet Fall is a spell only 3 people can use. Realizing the enemy is disoriented, Reiter aims to deliver a fatal blow. But the terror dragon just laughs, instantly regenerating his lost body part. The heroes freeze in shock and Lymine mocks them, disbelieving they thought just one spell would be enough. Uriel can't believe her eyes, he even took a direct hit from her spell. The girl fears he has no weak point. But Reiter doesn't lose his grip, using more and more new attacks against the dragon. Worthy opponents are all he ever wanted in life. A new battle begins to rage between them. Uriel can only watch and wonder what spell might help them next. The girl's mana is running out and Reiter is surely exhausted too. Neither of them has room for error. Starfall, a spell whose mastery was even greater than the previous one. It requires the mage's full mana, which could kill her, but there's no choice, people are counting on her. The sword, created from Lymine's flesh, is in no way inferior to the magical swordsman's blades. On the contrary, the swords gradually begin to shatter from the force of the terror dragon's blows. They can't withstand it. Reiter is defeated. Uriel sees this, but she can't be distracted. Their deaths won't be in vain, for the spell of her entire life is already ready. It's impossible to dodge Starfall, cast by humanity's strongest mage. Uriel only hopes that the monster before her eyes will die and vanish from the pages of this world's history. Lymine snaps his fingers and a barrier forms, its magic circle stopping the falling star. The heroine's spell, for which she expended all her mana, was simply shattered by the dragon's air barrier, disintegrating without even touching its opponent. The barrier reflected all her attacks. Exhausted, the girl collapsed to the ground. Lymine mockingly remarks that he expected something more interesting from her after the comet's fall. Uriel realizes they were just toys. Her ultimate spell was reflected, signifying her defeat. Meanwhile, the dragon slowly approaches the weakened girl who can't even run anymore. Expecting her end at the monster's hand, she resigned herself to her fate, but Lymine grabs her by the chin. In reality, she understands that the dragon won't kill her. What she hides is far more valuable than the lives of a few pathetic humans. The unknown power flowing through her veins contradicts human theories about magic and is incredibly potent. Suddenly lifting her into the air, Lymine sees no other choice but to kill her. but a loud crunch tears through the space. The barrier falls, the dragon is alarmed, thinking it was her, but she has no strength left. But then no one else could have broken the barrier. At that moment, a pair of beings appears before them. A man and a girl behind him calmly entered the space under the barrier, seemingly looking for its owner. Uriel realizes the girl behind him isn't human, but then who are they? The terror dragon is also displeased by this turn of events. The guy looks around, but his face twists with boredom and unmet expectations. He understands that the alarm was false despite his desire to fight a worthy opponent. Iris merely wonders what the protagonist wants, to avoid a fight. Guy only grows more disappointed, becoming increasingly bored with each passing second. He suggests to Iris that they leave, completely ignoring the dragon and the mage girl. Uriel is shocked by such behavior. She starts to think that the man and the girl with him are some kind of immortals. The terror dragon also turns its attention to them, trying to figure out who they are and where they came from. Guy tells the two that he came at the call of a monster detector, but he's not interested in fighting a dragon. It's boring and predictable. Yet, leaving it alive also feels wrong somehow. Iris is confused, as are the mage and the dragon. The girl catches the words about the monster detector, which Reuter mentioned before his death. Meanwhile, Lymine throws the mage to the ground, completely enraged by Guy's behavior. He decides to use a complex spell against the uninvited guests, so angered is he by the protagonist's disregard. By using magic of an otherworldly level, Lymine managed to capture Guy's attention. Uriel, trying to gather her wits, thinks that to understand what kind of magic was used so quickly, one would need immense knowledge and experience. Moreover, this unknown person says he can break the barrier in a few moments. At this point, the guy speaks, calling Lymine's spell a delusion and its structure shameful. The verdict is clear: this dragon is weak. Uriel just sat on the ground, unable to comprehend how quickly one could analyze spells. The terror dragon, on the other hand, grew angrier and angrier. His decisions became only more radical. He decides to crush Guy and Iris with the barrier. But Guy, being an experienced individual, decides to show Lymine exactly where his structure is flawed. Just a snap of his fingers was enough to shatter the barrier created by the great terror dragon, Lymine. Stunned by such power and confidence, Uriel and Lymine stared at Guy. Iris, meanwhile, was panicking, not wanting to be killed. Standing amidst the barrier's fragments and analyzing each part, the protagonist clearly demonstrated the spell's weakness, or rather, the flaw in the structure Lymine had recreated. In surprise, the dragon in human form leaped back. Astonished by this reaction, the young man made another remark about the quality of the spells and the magic used within them. Lymine's irritation only grew, and Uriel was even more shocked. Such an extraordinary level of magic mastery for a human. But Guy's reflections only increased the misunderstanding. He only now realized that Lymine was hiding his true power, as in this form he posed no even remote threat to him and Iris. Iris, for her part, simply sighed, observing Guy's behavior. In the end, Guy decided not to back down and to attack in return. It was his turn. He decided to start by dropping a meteorite, revealing a magic circle beneath himself and Iris. In shock, the dragon recoiled further away from the mage. 10 seconds is the time Guy would need to cast the spell, so Guy forced Lymine to improve the barrier's structure within 10 seconds or he would die. Iris's first lesson began right here and now. Guy started explaining everything from scratch, first clarifying why he needed so much time for the spell, simply because his cross was only first level. A bewildered Uriel tried to hide behind the teacher and student pair. Guy continued to explain the difference between human marks. A third-level mark would need 0.1 seconds, while he needed 0.5. In his eyes, this was a huge waste of time. Iris correctly pointed out that he had said he needed 10 seconds. But he, in his typical manner, simply stated that he was in no hurry and was waiting for the full effort from the dragon who could use such extraordinary magic. While the latter felt even more humiliated, the girl was amazed at how quickly he created spells, despite being a wielder of the first cross, the weakest one. But soon, the dragon couldn't tolerate such disrespect and unleashed a beam of light capable of instantly killing even a 10th-class adventurer. Both the dragon and the 11th Circle Mage were certain that the first cross wielder wouldn't survive such an attack. But Guy calmly drew his weapon and with a single movement, reflected the beam back. By deflecting the beam with his sword, the protagonist remained unharmed. Uriel couldn't recover from the shock, as she had been certain the young man was dead. The dragon already felt lost. He couldn't understand how a human could possess such reflexes. But Guy interrupted him, growing increasingly disappointed in his opponent. The protagonist decided to ask Iris how he managed to dodge, but she didn't understand either. So the young man decided to visually explain his method of reading spells in combat. By understanding mana flows, he could easily detect a hidden attack. Bored, he reminded them of the remaining 7 seconds and continued to wait. Amazed by his speed of analysis, the Witch of Ruin decided not to interfere, observing the situation from the sidelines. Lymine's confusion was evident. Enraged, the terror dragon made hasty decisions and activated a spell. It resembled a black hole surrounding his body. This was his attempt to unleash the true power of the terror dragon. Lymine strikes, tearing through space, expecting Guy to be unable to deflect such a complex attack. But the protagonist parries it precisely with his sword, leaving the lizard empty-handed. The faces of the other 3 show shock, horror, and complete bewilderment. Lymine is shaking with various emotions. He can't believe his strongest attack could be deflected by a simple sword, dispelled in midair without a trace. Still being a bit childish, the main character explains that with a sword and the enchantment imbued in it, he can deflect a spell as simple as Lymine's. To himself, Uriel disagrees, amazed at how Guy continues to swat away all of her former opponent's spells like they're nothing. As the hero pressures the dragon with the remaining 4 seconds, Lymine clenches his jaw in irritation and makes an important decision. He transforms his body into a dragon's shell, enhancing his magical and physical form. He stops playing these games, and even Guy sighs in relief that Lymine has decided to entertain him. In place of the human boy, a dragon's maw and head appear first, then his legs and arms become covered in scales. A complete transformation into a dragon occurs to increase his firepower against Guy. Lymine, the dragon of terror, turns out to be only half dragon. It becomes clear to everyone how he could use both human and dragon magic and refuse to transform. Nevertheless, his combat power has increased. But the creature standing before them declares that they should be grateful to witness his true form before their death. So, Lymine decides to unleash an enhanced dragon's breath, destroying everything in its path. Uriel prepared to deflect the blow, even though she knew she wouldn't succeed. The attack hit its target, only Iris and her staff were thrown in the other direction. Through several layers of defense, the dragon's destructive magic shatters everything. Nothing will be left of the surrounding space. A massive mushroom cloud of energy, dust, and smog from the force of the impact rose above the battlefield. No defensive spell could save them from an attack of such power, in Uriel's opinion. Having expended all his accumulated magic on a single strike, the half-dragon, half-human Lymine couldn't maintain his dragon form for long. But he thought that this would definitely be enough. Hysterical laughter escaped his lips, growing louder and louder with each passing second. But it wasn't over yet, because Guy's hand appears from the smog, and he ironically reminds Lymine that there's still time to improve the structure of the defensive spell, even if it's only 3 seconds. The countdown doesn't stop, and shock runs like goosebumps through Lymine's body, who has returned to human form. He freezes in horror at the realization that this unbearable man is still alive. 1 second until the meteor strike. Guy, without a single scratch on his signature black cloak, claims that Lymine couldn't have run out of powerful attacks and demands to see an attack more potent than the last. For what felt like the 100th time in this fight, Lymine screamed that such a thing was simply impossible. Even Uriel, who was trying to find a logical explanation for what she saw, couldn't understand how Guy had stopped the attack. Whether it was a defensive barrier, a counterattack, or even a summoning circle, it remained a mystery. In reality, it was much simpler. Guy was tired of the prolonged battle, so he found a weak point in the center of the spell and simply dispelled it. For the kingdom's strongest mage, such an explanation sounded even more incredible, as she refused to believe that anyone could analyze and destroy a spell mid-flight. As soon as the time magic ended, Guy's first priority was to make sure Iris, who had been thrown back by the shockwave, was still alive. After confirming her safety, he calmly declared their duel over and launched his own counterattack, summoning a gigantic meteor onto the battlefield. The artifact Guy created shoots from the ground straight into space, cutting through all layers of the atmosphere. It then transforms and returns, triggering the meteor fall spell. For the last time, the protagonist reminded the Dragon of Terror that inaction meant death. In those split seconds, Lymine decided to create a void barrier, believing it would be strong enough to withstand the force of the meteor's impact. A crazy grin spread across the half-dragon's face. Uriel recalled that he had managed to deflect a Starfall spell so he wouldn't lose to a lower-level spell than that. As if concerned for him, Guy asked him one last time if he was sure about his decision. But the half-dragon just cut the protagonist off, trying to close and reinforce all possible gaps in his defensive barrier. As expected, the meteor fall pierced through the opponent's void barrier, leaving him no chance against the protagonist. The residual force from the impact spread across the entire battlefield. Everyone raised their shields and barriers except for Iris, who, frightened, hid behind a rock a little distance from the epicenter. Lymine was defeated. That was the outcome of their confrontation. Uriel stared at Guy's back, trying to understand who he was and why killing a half-dragon had been such a simple task for him. The protagonist still hadn't witnessed any transcendent magic, remembering that he had wanted to leave immediately. After all, nothing interesting had happened. After Guy's powerful meteor strike, all that remained of Lymine was the silhouette of his human form, from which fiery flames erupted. Guy observed it and surmised that it was a dragon's soul stone that had emerged from Lymine's body, but its form was distorted. The mage speculated that the transcendent magic might have greatly affected the dragon. Opening a portal to store the artifact he found, he noted that this stone would be useful for his research. By studying this stone, he could learn more about transcendent magic. Guy was about to step through the open portal when Uriel, whom he had saved, called out to him. During the battle, the witch had noticed his extraordinary power, which surpassed even her own, despite her being considered the strongest in the kingdom. Guy and Iris turned to face the witch. She asked the young man if the meteor strike had been his spell. Uriel remained determined to uncover the secret of his power. He confirmed that it was a spell. The witch then remarked that this power was unlike anything she knew. Even her own spell, Starfall, couldn't break Lymine's barrier, yet Guy had managed to defeat the dragon. Guy simply said he had sensed the spell and asked if she had used it, glancing at the large crater left after the battle. The girl, stammering slightly, answered affirmatively. In her thoughts, she speculated that she had managed to pique the mage's interest and might be able to apprentice herself to him, just as Iris had. Her level 2 mark on her hand was well suited for high-level spells, but Uriel wasn't sure if Guy would agree to her proposal. The mage noticed she seemed to want to say something and urged her not to hesitate. Uriel continued to look at the mage, thinking that perhaps she should offer him an equivalent exchange to gain the opportunity to learn from him. Her expression became wary. She realized that after defeating the dragon, Guy had become interested in transcendent magic. The girl understood that he might discover this magic within her, and if he had already noticed it, there was no telling what he would do. She was certain he wouldn't hold back and would conduct experiments on her, even torture. The girl realized she needed to be careful with her own desires, as any mistake could cost her life. Guy asked if his meteor strike spell had interested Uriel. The girl, looking at him awkwardly, replied no. Guy and Iris looked at the girl in confusion. Turning to Iris, he said he thought the witch was interested in that spell and asked the dragon for her opinion. Iris struggled to answer. But the girl told him she was interested. She understood there was no turning back and she wouldn't be able to escape if she wanted to. Looking confidently at Guy, Uriel said that she was interested in him personally. Guy silently looked at her, then turned to Iris, clarifying if he understood correctly. Iris awkwardly confirmed it. The dark-haired mage merely became flustered after her words. Narrowing her brows, Uriel added that his mark was level 1 and not suitable for combat, and apologized if the remark seemed rude to the mage. Guy responded that he didn't find the witch's words rude, and assured her that everyone already knew about his unique abilities. The girl approached him slightly and asked why he possessed such powerful skills. Taking it as another compliment, Guy was once again convinced that his strength had piqued her interest. With a satisfied look, he explained that it was all the result of his rigorous training and high intelligence. Moving closer to Guy, Uriel asked him to teach her how to gain similar powers, promising to do whatever it took in return. Guy and Iris were stunned by the witch's request. The mage asked why she wanted to become stronger. Her face became resolute, and she replied that she wanted to kill someone. Guy, satisfied with her answer, noted that their goals aligned. He raised his index finger toward her and asked another question. Guy asked Uriel if the person she wanted to kill was connected to the transcendent magic that also lay dormant within her. Uriel realized her guess was right, that Guy had noticed the transcendent magic in her, and she asked him for confirmation. The young man replied that he had noticed it from the very beginning. He had seen right through her, observing this magic within her, and said that it carried traces of distortion. Hearing his explanation, the girl was certain she had managed to hide the distortions. Guy asked Iris if she had also noticed the transcendent magic in Uriel, but the dragon only gave the mage an awkward smile. The young man was surprised that Iris hadn't even noticed it, to which the dragon began to try and convince him that she had indeed noticed the magic. The young man decided to help Uriel become stronger, but he also intended to add some conditions. The girl mentally prepared herself to accept Guy's conditions in order to train under him and gain valuable knowledge. She was even ready to give both her arms if necessary. But Guy only asked her to tell him about transcendent magic in detail, its effects, drawbacks, and how to acquire it. Not expecting such conditions, Uriel stared at the mage in surprise. She asked if that was her only condition, to which she received an affirmative answer. Rummaging through her jacket, the girl pulled out a thick, locked book and handed it to the mage. She added that reading it would take a long time, but it contained all the information that might interest Guy. Taking the book, he saw that the author was listed as Uriel Abentrot. The girl confirmed it was her work and said the book contained all the knowledge about transcendent magic. Guy thanked her and promised to read it. The young man was about to state his second condition to Uriel, who was already prepared. Smiling at her, he asked her to become his companion on his journeys. The girl looked at Guy with surprise, completely not expecting to hear that. He explained that he intended to form his own party and had been looking for companions all this time, as it would be easier to train them that way. He noted that Uriel's mark perfectly complemented her desire to become stronger and also mentioned her other talent. Even he himself achieved great combat potential with his first mark, and with her mark, this path would take less time and effort. Delighted by the mage's offer, the girl, with a radiant smile, agreed to be on the same team as him. Uriel confessed that she feared being experimented on if he found out about her transcendent magic. Guy replied that it sounded like a decent plan for study, to which she responded uncertainly. Iris, clutching her stomach, expressed joy that the mage had found companions, but added that she was already hungry. Uriel, the Witch of Doom, was considered one of the strongest in the kingdom, but it seemed the girl herself was more focused on her title. During the battle with Lymine, she couldn't harm him, but Guy handled him magnificently. She was curious about the mage's essence, noting his incredible strength, but there was something else that interested Uriel about him. Glancing at the dragon who was holding her stomach due to hunger, she inquired about her identity. Iris's magical aura wasn't human-like, but it was clear that Guy had trained her to fight. Noticing that Iris was very hungry, she took a bar from her jacket and offered it to the girl. Iris looked at the food with astonishment and asked Uriel for permission. Iris ate with pleasure. Uriel, watching her, decided to clarify if she was human. Iris, chewing on the bar, said that she was a dark dragon. Hearing the girl's true identity, Uriel was frightened. She knew that the dark dragon Iris was known among others for her strength and cruelty. Maintaining a cold expression, Iris was about to ask another question. The witch, looking at her fearfully, inquired about the dragon's question. But tears welled up in Iris's eyes, and with a pleading look, she asked for help understanding Guy, as he sometimes said things that were too complex. Not expecting such a request from a dark dragon, Uriel awkwardly agreed. When Guy heard the monster detector go off, he expected to see a strong opponent, but it turned out to be a dragon. Nevertheless, after that battle, he still gained something valuable. He met the witch Uriel, who agreed to work with him on a team. Guy looked at the girls, who, in his opinion, were getting along well. Iris was asking the girl's name. Uriel had a second mark especially suited for long-range spells. Moreover, she possessed transcendent magic, which Guy had long wanted to study, though it seemed she couldn't use it at the moment. Meanwhile, the girl told Iris her full name. Guy had just thought about forming his own party, and on the very same day he had already found 2 companions. Guy smiled warmly at the thought. But suddenly he was enveloped by bad memories related to his former comrades. Everything was fine until the first mission, after which they ran away, refusing to fight a dragon and abandoning Guy. The guy realized that he couldn't waste a second and had to act right now. He needed to make a good impression on the girls so they wouldn't abandon him like his past comrades. After saying the girl's name, Iris noted that the girl's name sounded like something delicious. The dragon's eyes sparkled at the thought and she began to drool. Uriel was startled by his reaction to her name, pulling away from the dragon's predatory gaze, which was already drooling profusely. Guy noticed that Iris had scared the witch with her behavior and told her that her answers were sometimes strange. He realized he needed to keep an eye on Iris too, so she wouldn't cause any unnecessary trouble. He then explained to Uriel that Iris wasn't human and therefore lacked human common sense. Turning to his companion, he advised Iris to try and understand people better. The dragon stood up straight and accepted the mage's words. Uriel asked who would be teaching Iris this. With a smug grin, the young man proudly replied that he would be the one to do it. Uriel, averting her gaze after hearing this, awkwardly expressed that she understood him. Noticing Uriel's reaction, the mage was surprised that she doubted his ability to teach Iris. He reminded her that he had lived among humans even before he started his research, so he should understand them well. Turning her gaze back to the mage, the girl smiled and asked his name. Guy himself realized that he hadn't even introduced himself to her the entire time. After he briefly introduced himself, the girl repeated his name and reacted sharply, which surprised the young man. Realizing who was standing before her, she asked him if he was that guy. According to her, that guy was a legendary battle mage who disappeared 100 years ago, but who had destroyed a huge number of magical creatures and completed many top-rank quests. She added that he had also saved the kingdom more than once and possessed enough power to even become a god. Uriel, with slight apprehension, also added that his goal was to destroy all dragons. Iris was terrified by this revelation, fearing she might be killed. But Guy, after a moment of thought, said that wasn't his goal, so he asked Iris to calm down. The girl herself was speechless and stood with her gaze lowered. He added to Uriel's stories that he had heard enough tales about destroyed dragons over the past 100 years. But in his mind, he had no idea that he had truly killed so many dragons from the list. Guy understood that he needed to be honest with his companions, so he decided not to hide anything. The mage confessed to the girls that he had killed about 100 dragons. Uriel, surprised by the number of dragons destroyed over the past 100 years, stated that she hadn't even heard of dragons rampaging and causing so much destruction in such a short period. Guy then added to his confession that he had killed hundreds of dragons in a single day. Iris was terrified by what she heard from the mage, while Uriel was astonished that he managed to kill them all in one day. Meanwhile, the dragon hid from the young man. Noticing the dragon's reaction, he realized he had scared her. He reassured her once more that he had no intention of killing his companions and again asked her to calm down. Trembling with fear, Iris said she had heard of a magic ritual requiring 108 dragon souls and asked if Guy knew about it. He replied that this was the first he was hearing of it. Iris then didn't understand why he had to kill so many dragons. Guy's expression changed and he coldly replied that those dragons were too hostile towards him and he had to defend himself. After his sharp response and change in expression, tears welled up in the dragon's eyes again and she became very frightened. She awkwardly smiled and said she would obey his instructions. Guy noticed that the dragon said this in a strange voice. Uriel commented that killing 100 dragons in a day was an incredible achievement, considering they were almost killed by just one. Guy, lost in thought, considered that the dragon wasn't even strong, but he knew if he said that out loud, it might offend Uriel, so he needed to choose his words carefully. He told her that this was the strongest dragon he had ever killed. However, he added that this dragon was only strong for a mid-level party. His words sharply pierced the witch's chest. She hadn't expected such honesty. She sank to the ground, speechless after the mage's words. Guy asked what was wrong and leaned down to help her up. Uriel humbly replied that she could no longer consider herself a mid-level party. Tears welled in her eyes because she and her group had lost, even though they were considered one of the strongest teams in the kingdom. Guy noted in his mind that her team wasn't mid-level at all and was surprised they were considered the strongest. He had thought he'd reached their level of strength over the past 10 years. He wondered what could have gone wrong. Guy turned to Uriel and asked if she had heard of a book he had written. The girl clarified if he meant the book titled Introduction to Magical Combat. The mage smiled and confirmed it was that very book. He added that he had written several other books, such as Practical Application of Combat Magic and Fundamental Theories of Magical Combat. He had written them 100 years ago with the goal of helping mages improve their skills, and thought that reading the books would be enough for them to reach Uriel's level. But it turned out the book titles were misleading. Guy thought he might have made a mistake when copying the books using magic, which was why no one could read them. These books proved difficult for beginners to understand. Even Uriel admitted she didn't grasp everything. She added that she had heard about the work of scholars from the kingdom's Institute of Magic who were trying to decipher them every day. However, Guy was certain he had written them in the language of this continent. Uriel explained that the problem wasn't the words themselves, but the difficult structure of the content, which was hard to comprehend. The mage noted in his thoughts that he had omitted some key points when writing the books, but if he had written everything in detail, they would have turned into quite voluminous tomes. Bored after discussing the books, he suggested they talk about the party members. He told the girls that he wanted another ally for his team. Currently, Guy had the first mark, Uriel had the second, and Iris was a dragon, not a human. Iris's physical abilities surpassed both his and Uriel's. He asked Iris what mark he wanted next for his team. Iris didn't expect such a question from the mage and guessed he wanted the fourth, though she sounded unsure. Guy watched the dragon intently, his gaze stern as she continued to sweat and get nervous. Ultimately, the mage confirmed her guess, causing her to fall back with a sigh. Uriel immediately caught her. He explained that the second mark was for combat magic and the third was for reducing spell casting time. The fourth, though it had a short range, was distinguished by its high power and speed. Guy mentioned he once knew a swordsman with the fourth mark and suggested Uriel might be familiar with him. He then revealed the swordsman's name, Ryder. The girl was surprised by his statement, repeating the swordsman's name. Guy also reminded her that Ryder had been on the same team as Uriel. However, the girl thought Guy might have mistaken him for someone else. The young man also began to doubt if he had pronounced the name correctly. He admitted that he usually never forgets anything related to magic, but he has a tendency to forget people's names. Guy even considered creating a memory spell, which made the girl give him a strange look. But looking down, she stated that Ryder was dead. He had sacrificed himself in the battle against Lymine. Recalling the gruesome scene of Ryder's death, she added that he had been cut in half. She also suggested that if Guy had a resurrection spell, they could try it. However, Guy confessed that he couldn't resurrect people and asked the girl if she was sure about Ryder's death. But the girl turned her back to him and pointed to the spot where the swordsman's corpse might be. Upon arriving at the location, they found Ryder's body surrounded by blood. However, Guy noticed that the swordsman's body wasn't cut in half, and Uriel also took note of this. After inspecting the body from head to toe, it was indeed intact. Uriel couldn't believe what she was seeing. Suddenly, the dead man opened his eyes, fixing his gaze on the newcomers. He asked if they were talking about him. Uriel jumped in fright and hugged Iris, not expecting to see her dead comrade resurrected. Ryder then stood up, stretching as if he hadn't died at all. Uriel stared at her comrade and asked why he was still alive. But the young man, looking puzzled, asked the girl why he should be dead. Uriel explained that he had been cut in half during the battle. The girl didn't hide her surprise looking at the healthy Ryder. She added that people usually die from such an attack, which surprised the swordsman. After considering everything, Guy came to a conclusion. He explained that a person's magical circuit core is in the heart, and the control circuits are in the brain. If a person loses the lower part of their body, both circuits continue to function. Without training, they would most likely die from blood loss. The mage concluded that cutting a person in half is not enough to kill them if they are capable of regeneration. Ryder, giving Uriel a sly look, asked if she understood everything he had said. The girl replied that it was beyond the ordinary. Ryder continued to tease the girl, calling her foolish and saying he was glad to meet someone so understanding, as he clapped Guy on the shoulder and laughed. Uriel offered an awkward smile and looked down. Iris let out a casual sigh. After shaking the mage's hand, Ryder asked if he was a good fit for his group and received an affirmative answer. Guy was thrilled that he had finally managed to assemble a complete and balanced team. Now Guy had a full team, Ryder the swordsman, Iris the dragon, and Uriel the witch, who, with an awkward smile, still couldn't quite believe what was happening. Noticing the girl's expression, Guy thought she seemed troubled. She probably thought he was crazy. The mage wondered how he could make her understand that he genuinely cared about the well-being of his allies. But before he could do that, the mage asked where their other party members were. The girl looked at him and clarified if he meant the 10th rank adventurers. She explained that the adventurers were weaker than them. She and her group had tried to convince them to retreat, but recalling the horrific scenes from the battle, she said the dragon had killed them all. Her team had been too weak to protect them. As he surveyed the ground, Guy realized that the meteorite's impact had churned up the soil, revealing the adventurers' bodies beneath. He could barely sense traces of their magic, which meant they were still alive. He speculated that the dragon hadn't checked their vital signs. Many dragons enjoy tormenting their victims before death. Perhaps Lymine was one of them. Assuring Uriel that he could still save them, he raised his hand. A pentagram formed before him, emitting a bright glow. The girl realized the mage was using a restoration spell and asked why he was casting it on the ground. He glanced at the girl, surprised that she hadn't yet understood his actions. Uriel continued to watch cautiously. The light continued to shine on the ground until it cracked, and a hand emerged from beneath it. The bodies of the adventurers, Kaito, Noel, and Biles, began to rise from the earth. Biles rubbed her head, unable to comprehend why they had been buried. Kaito asked what had happened to Lymine. Noel, looking puzzled, clarified if it had been a dragon. Ryder burst into laughter upon seeing Uriel and Iris's reactions. The girl was lying unconscious in Iris's arms, while Iris looked back at the mage, saying that what Guy had done was indeed a terrifying sight. The mage agreed with the statement, awkwardly rubbing his head. After some time, the heroes sat on royal sofas around a table with cups of tea. Guy announced the start of their first meeting as a team. Uriel, feeling the chair, noted that the mage had maintained quality and managed to create the furniture in an instant, asking him if he truly possessed the first mark. Guy replied that, unfortunately, he did, and showed his hand with the mark. The dark-haired mage had managed to heal the adventurers and ordered them to report the killing to the government, while he and his allies held a meeting to celebrate the formation of their group. Previously, his teams had never lasted more than half a day, with the shortest one breaking up in just 2 hours. Almost 2 hours had passed since this group was formed, and he didn't want them to beat that record. If he wanted to keep them together, they needed a common goal. They had to find it and pursue it for cohesion. The guy shared his idea with his allies, stating that he wanted to set a common goal. This idea immediately resonated with Raider, who confidently declared that he wanted to become stronger. Uriel agreed with him, showing her determination to gain new powers. Iris, however, sat awkwardly on the couch and hesitantly mumbled the same thing. The guy noticed that this was the first time Iris had said something like that, which immediately made the dragon start making excuses. He added that if she had a different goal, she should voice it, but Iris decided to state the common goal once more. More confidently this time, she declared that she wanted to become stronger. However, her words didn't impress Raider and Uriel, who silently watched the dragon. Having decided on their goal, the guy moved on to the next question. He asked his allies how exactly they planned to become stronger. Raider, with a proud smile, replied that he could become stronger by fighting powerful opponents. Uriel said she would need to work hard and improve her mastery of magic. Iris, after listening to her companions, simply repeated the same thing, putting on a thoughtful expression. The guy immediately realized she was just repeating what others said. Iris looked awkwardly at the wary mage. But turning his attention to Uriel and Raider, he told them that they were right in their desires. He added that combat power could be divided into 3 components: strength, skills, and items. The first 2 points, according to him, shouldn't be a problem. He planned to teach them skills himself, and items shouldn't be difficult either. The main challenge was the abilities themselves. But seeing their confidence in killing small dragons, he was ready to personally train each of them. Raider pointed out that the guy had called Lymine a small dragon. Uriel, however, was more interested in the mage personally training them. The guy confirmed her words, explaining that once they acquired skills, they would understand what items they needed, and then the next stage would come, choosing their items. His allies would need to gather the necessary materials, and the mage himself would handle their creation. Uriel noted that the guy's first mark was best suited for creating items. With a smile, the girl looked forward to seeing it with her own eyes. The mage then continued, discussing power, which he called a complex subject. He added that as humans, they were all limited in both physical and magical strength. Pointing at Iris, who was dozing off, he declared that her power would be the greatest of all. Iris immediately straightened up and reported that she would do the work. Taking a cup of tea, she was surprised that Guy could sense people's potential. Guy, looking at his marked hand, explained that people deal with marks their entire lives. Judging by combat power, his strength was the weakest. But he stated that nothing prevented them from finding a way to surpass the human limit of power. Reiter asked Guy what he meant by the human limit of power. The mage clarified that he was referring to powers that don't inherently belong to humans. Uriel pondered what he said. The mage spread his arms and declared that he was talking about transcendent magic. He continued, explaining that monsters called spirits of burning stars exist in space. They wield transcendent magic whose properties can be described and thus studied and replicated. Folding his hands, Guy added that typically when people kill a dragon, they can't replicate its deadly breath, and when they defeat a hound, they don't gain its superior sense of smell. With the spirits of burning stars, it's different. The victor gains all the loser's powers and becomes stronger. The spirits continue this process until their power reaches its limit. Guy said that by obtaining even a single fragment of a spirit, they could begin to use at least a small part of its power. Reiter, however, asked the mage if this endeavor wasn't strange. But Guy remained confident in his words and asked Uriel for her opinion. Reiter and Iris looked back at the girl, awaiting her answer. Closing her eyes, the girl said that Guy was right. The transcendent magic within Uriel had been granted to her by the organization she once belonged to, but she still couldn't use it to its full potential. Sipping his tea, Guy asked if she could have killed Lymine if she had mastered this magic. After thinking, Uriel supposed she could have. She mentioned that the spirit fragment the mage spoke of had simply fallen to earth. Guy asked if she knew where they got this power from. But the girl didn't know. Information about transcendent magic was hidden from ordinary mortals like Uriel. Only the supreme government possessed this information. With a determined smile, he declared that they would find out themselves. Reiter chuckled, saying they would wholeheartedly and magically extract all known information. Iris asked how exactly they planned to use magic. Flexing and showing off his muscles, Reiter demonstrated his magical extraction method. Iris, looking at him awkwardly, noted that those were just muscles. Uriel added that she had vague memories of the award ceremony day, and it all took place at their headquarters. Standing up, Reiter suggested that his allies head to the headquarters, but the witch stopped him, saying it wasn't that simple. Uriel had once tried to get to that place but only found a crater there resembling the trace of a fallen star. Guy realized that the organization was covering its tracks. He asked the girl if the person she wanted to kill belonged to this organization. The girl explained that one person used to be called an agent and was the most influential in the organization. Smiling, Guy suggested they make a plan. First, they would need to find traces of the organization, then a way to obtain transcendent magic. While executing the plan, they would have to fight enemies and improve their skills. Reiter liked the plan, and so did Uriel. Iris stretched and yawned, asking where they should start their journey now. Uriel added that they should first go to the kingdom of Meyers and report Lymine's murder. Once this information reached the organization, they should immediately receive an invitation from it. Hearing where they needed to go first, Guy pondered and recalled his stay in that kingdom many years ago, noting how magnificent it was. Reiter smirked and asked if he was sure it still retained its former appearance. Guy ignored the swordsman's words and prepared to use teleportation magic to move to the kingdom. His allies were surprised that the mage could even use such spells, but were glad they would get there before the adventurers. In distant lands, among mountains and forests, lay the capital of the kingdom of Meyers, surrounded by high walls and boasting a developed urban infrastructure within. Approaching the main gates of the kingdom, Reiter asked his companions if they had arrived and received an affirmative answer. Reiter noted that the kingdom was protected by a barrier that the government was proud of, as it had saved them many times. He explained that the impregnable barrier was created many years ago by a powerful mage, but Guy interrupted, saying that he himself was the creator. The swordsman chuckled and replied that he had expected such words from him. The team entered the government building with its richly decorated interior. They walked forward, observing the spacious rooms, with motionless guards standing on either side. Guy noticed the lack of guards and wondered if something had happened. But Uriel replied that it was normal since the enemy couldn't pass through the protective barrier, so there was no point in having a large guard. Reiter, putting his arm around Guy's shoulder, suggested they not go straight to the king but grab a bite to eat with Iris. Hearing about food, the dragon immediately perked up and her mouth began to water. However, the mage declined, stating he had a small request for the king. Iris was saddened by the refusal to eat, while Reiter just smirked at the mage and left him to his own devices. Soon after, guards approached them, immediately recognizing Uriel and Reiter and greeting them. This meant they had completed their mission and destroyed Lymine. Other guards quickly surrounded them with joyful shouts. Uriel asked them to report to the king that they had successfully completed the mission, to which the head guard assured her he would do so immediately, continuing to smile contentedly. But before that, he asked to see their passes. The passes turned out to be small crystals. Seeing that new allies had also come with them, he requested passes from Guy and Iris. Realizing these were unknown individuals, the guards immediately blocked their path with spears, asking who they were and stating they couldn't pass without a permit. Uriel explained that Guy and Iris had helped them kill the dragon and asked them to let them through. The head guard looked back at the girl and replied that they would have to be detained, according to His Majesty's orders. Reiter said that Guy was a battle mage and asked if they had heard of him. Hearing this, the head guard began to carefully examine the mage, but admitted he didn't know who Reiter was talking about. Making a decision, the head guard decided to allow Uriel and Reiter to see the king, but to detain Guy and Iris. The mage's allies assured him that they would ask the king for permission for him to pass with them and proceeded forward. Seeing her companions move away, Iris asked the mage what his next plan was. Kneeling on one knee and bowing their heads, Uriel and Reiter stood before the king. The king joyfully congratulated them on completing their missions, saying he expected such success from the 11th rank. But Uriel confessed that they were not the ones who killed Lymine, which raised questions from His Majesty. The girl continued with a request to introduce the king to those who managed to defeat the dragon, but Reiter immediately stopped her, warning that they had already arrived at the location. A portal appeared before them. Iris peered out from this portal. Uriel was shocked by what she saw, Reiter quietly laughed, and the king was surprised by what was happening. Another voice came from the portal, demanding Iris go further, to which the girl fiercely refused, saying they had chosen an inappropriate time. But a hand immediately pushed her, causing Iris to fly out of the portal. The mage himself instantly emerged from the portal before the king and his allies. He looked around at everyone present and asked them what had happened. Uriel stared at the young man in shock, while Reiter seemed to enjoy such a dramatic entrance. However, the king was horrified by the unexpected arrival of this unknown person. He immediately summoned the guards to apprehend the uninvited guests. The guards tried to attack the mage, but Guy opened a portal in front of them, altering the trajectory of their spear attacks. They didn't understand what had just happened and assumed the young man had used magic to deflect the attack. The mage, however, noted in his thoughts that they had attacked without even thinking and was surprised by their reaction. He asked them if they could hear what he was trying to tell them. But the king furiously cut him off, saying there was no need to listen to an intruder and demanded an explanation for how he managed to enter. Guy, keeping the situation under control, calmly replied that it was thanks to teleportation magic. Yet the king continued to shout that the barrier had been created by a legendary mage and would not allow any magic to pass. Hearing the mention of a legendary mage, the young man scratched his head and asked if that mage's name was Guy. The king was surprised by the mage's question and asked where he got that information, as only members of the royal family knew about him. Guy casually replied to the king that he was, in fact, that legendary mage. The king was stunned by what he heard. He ordered the guards to stop and release the mage. They obeyed, lowering their spears, but continued to watch the young man closely. The king silently looked up at a painting hanging above his throne. The painting depicted the former king and a mage in dark attire whose gaze was fixed forward. This mage turned out to be Guy himself. The king compared the depicted mage to Guy and noted the resemblance, except for the age. Guy briefly replied that age shouldn't be attributed to a battle mage. Opening a portal, the mage extended his hand towards it, saying that since the king didn't believe him, he would show him the contract that remained from the time of its construction. Pulling out a scroll, he magically brought it to the king and unrolled it. After carefully reading the contents, the king couldn't believe what he saw, but noticed that the seal on it belonged to the royal family. Ultimately, the king decided to dismiss the guards. They resisted, but upon hearing the order, they retreated. The king then looked at his guests and apologized for the incident, explaining that he had no ill intentions towards Lord Guy. He offered his help if they needed it. Guy smiled and thanked the king for his understanding. The mage then asked the king to register him in the kingdom under a different name. Hearing the mage's request, the king was surprised. Guy explained that without changing his name, he would be treated as a hero and it would be easier for him under a different name. However, the king suggested Guy keep his name, explaining that a mage's name is common these days and no one would suspect he was the legendary mage. Guy, surprised by how quickly his name had spread, admitted it wasn't even the best option. Changing his expression, he was about to voice another request, which caught His Majesty's attention. Looking at Iris, he asked the king to register her as his companion, stating the dragon's name. Iris herself hadn't expected such a request from Guy and didn't know what to say. She simply introduced herself as a dragon, which surprised the king. Guy assured him that in her human form she wouldn't cause any problems and asked for the king's opinion on the matter. The king smiled awkwardly and agreed with the mage. The king agreed and promised to fulfill the request. Guy turned to Iris and told her to behave like a human. She nervously indicated that she understood the command. However, Guy wasn't finished. Turning his focus back to the king, he asked if he knew about an organization that granted people extraordinary magic. Upon hearing the mage's question, the king looked down and pondered. Looking up, he asked if Guy was referring to the Brotherhood of Burning Stars. Guy looked at his companions and clarified if that was the organization's name. Uriel, with her arms crossed, confirmed that's what the Royal Intelligence Department called it, adding that they weren't great at coming up with names. Reiter jokingly compared the organization to a secret society and asked for everyone else's opinion. The king rubbed his chin and stated that he would order his subordinates to gather information about this organization, but warned that it might take about a week. He explained that the process of getting access to that place takes a long time, so he intended to assign the task to the Knight Commander. He wasn't opposed to helping the group, but the king had more important matters to attend to. Uriel addressed the king with a suggestion that he could resolve their problems faster, but he again explained that he couldn't abandon his duties. Guy, observing the scene, hadn't expected the king to delegate such tasks to subordinates. Iris noticed his thoughtful gaze. The mage walked to the exit and said he would wait for the results. With a sigh, Uriel looked away, disappointed that she couldn't ask the king to resolve their matters more quickly. Reiter, on the other hand, looked down and said nothing. The king smiled awkwardly and apologized to the team. The dark-haired mage noticed how Uriel and Reiter's expressions had changed. He asked them what was wrong. Uriel admitted that she wasn't on good terms with the Knight Commander, and Reiter said the same, staring discontentedly off to the side. Guy asked what this Knight Commander was like. Uriel briefly explained that the commander was hardworking. The mage clarified if he was competent, but Uriel again repeated that the man was hardworking, which raised questions for Guy. In the mountains lay a kingdom surrounded by walls. Inside, life was bustling. People went about their business and market stalls were open. Meanwhile, Reiter and Guy were in the room. The swordsman was sprawled out on the bed, while the mage and the dragon looked through books scattered across the covers. Uriel then entered the room with a letter from the Knight Commander. The letter arrived quite quickly, just a couple of hours after their meeting with the king. The mage was surprised that the commander was indeed so diligent. Iris, on the other hand, was reading Guy's books and getting confused by the content, which made her quite dizzy. The witch handed the mage the letter, saying it would be good if it contained at least some information about the organization. Guy asked what else could be in the letter besides details about it. The mage opened the letter and his companions immediately gathered around him, curious about its contents. He noticed that the letter mentioned the Brotherhood of the Blazing Star, but the rest of the content made them very wary, and it raised questions for Iris. The letter stated that the Knight Commander had been instructed to treat the guests with all due courtesy, but he wanted to ensure they were following the kingdom's rules and demanded they provide him with a full report on the destruction of the dragon Lymine. Uriel was displeased with the commander's order and remarked that they wouldn't even have enough paper to write everything down. She noted that if the commander didn't like something in the report, he could immediately reject their request. Guy pondered this, surprised by the kind of person the Knight Commander was. Placing the paper on the table and picking up a quill, he decided to write a full report on the completed mission, stating that in this case they would play by his rules. He assured his allies that everything would go smoothly and asked them not to disturb him. To himself, he noted the commander's strictness, which was useful for work but could also lead to trouble. The mage looked over at Iris and asked if she wanted to try writing her first report. The dragon stared at the mage in surprise. Guy noted that it would be good practice for the girl, which Iris herself couldn't quite believe. Sitting down at the table, Iris picked up the ink with Uriel watching intently. The dragon brought the ink closer to her face and tasted it, which horrified the witch. The taste was unpleasant and she immediately spat it out. The witch was startled by such a reaction. The witch silently watched Iris, who looked puzzled. Ryder laughed, saying it was the dragon's first time trying ink. Guy sighed and decided to write the report himself. In the report, he mentioned that he was disappointed by the dragon's weakness in battle and thought he could learn more about transcendent magic. But at the end of the fight, Lymine's body simply vanished. Holding up the finished sheet, he announced that he was done, but Uriel warned that they might be rejected. The mage asked why, and the witch explained that he had included too many unclear details. Guy suggested she rewrite the report, but she refused, saying she didn't know how to compose them. Ryder volunteered to do it himself. He took Guy's seat and picked up the quill. Guy watched Ryder from the side, hoping he would write better than him, noting that the most important things in a report were readability and credibility. Ryder finished the report and handed the manuscript to the mage with a satisfied smile. Guy decided to check the swordsman's report immediately, as such confidence made him uneasy. Opening the report, he and Iris were amazed by its rich and official content, noting that the work closely resembled that of high-ranking officials. Ryder, with his arms crossed, was pleased with his work, while Uriel had forgotten that the swordsman was always good with documentation. With the report ready, they set off to submit it to the Knight Commander. The group stood before the table where the commander was seated. The commander opened the report on the death of the dragon Lymine and began to read it. As the commander read, he noted that they would have to prove its authenticity, which made Uriel close her eyes. The content of the report slightly surprised him. Then he tossed the report onto his desk, saying they were mistaken if they thought they had prepared a worthy report. He gave them 5 minutes to think about what had gone wrong. Guy held the report, looking at Commander Mayus with a puzzled expression. Ryder just gave an awkward smile in response, while Uriel covered her face with her hand. Ryder agreed to check what he had written incorrectly, and Guy asked if he wasn't perfect. The swordsman nevertheless began making corrections. The mage quietly noted that there was no ink in the pen, but Ryder asked him to trust him. After finishing the report, he handed it to the commander. Commander Mayus began reading the revised version. In the end, he liked the report, noting that it had become quite modest, especially considering the team consisted of battle mages. Guy looked back at Iris in horror, but she reminded him that she was just a normal dragon. Uriel then asked what the commander might not have liked before. The mage guessed that he hadn't changed anything and received confirmation. Uriel explained that Commander Mayus's job was to make someone redo something. Now the mage understood why Uriel and Ryder disliked the commander, noting that he hadn't thought the man was so diligent in that regard. Commander Mayus stared at the mage. He asked the mage if he was Guy, to which the young man confirmed. The commander stated that the management of battle mages was under the control of the knights and noted that the report mentioned Guy working with Uriel and Ryder. The mage confirmed and asked what was bothering the commander. The commander dismissively replied that he wouldn't allow the mage to fight alongside battle mages, explaining that Guy could lead to a loss of their combat power, all while sipping his tea. Guy asked if he doubted his abilities. The commander clarified his rank. But the young man merely inquired about the meaning of rank, which made the commander spit out all his drink from his mouth in shock. He was surprised that the mage didn't know such basic information and wondered about the king, who had recommended this mage, calling him useless. A guard immediately approached the commander and handed him a handkerchief to wipe his mouth. But after thinking it over, he smiled slyly and decided to give Guy a chance, announcing that he would test his strength with a trial the next day. Guy was surprised by the commander's response. Ryder just smirked at this conclusion, while Iris yawned behind them and Uriel simply shook her head. The next day, the team stood before Guy's upcoming trial. They were in the arena. Guy assumed they needed to show their skills, but his companions explained that the power of battle mages was hard to measure, so they couldn't just claim their king was strong. A familiar voice echoed from behind a pillar, declaring that Guy hadn't chickened out and had shown up. Commander Mayus, sitting on a throne, informed him of the trial's conditions. If the mage managed to defeat the examiner, the commander would allow him to form his own group. Without wasting a minute, he announced who the examiner for this trial would be. Guy silently awaited his arrival. The mage's examiner turned out to be a 10th rank knight. He appeared before the mage on horseback and in full armor. He maintained a stern expression, showing no unnecessary emotions. The examiner's name was Ganes. The commander cheerfully remarked that the mage probably didn't expect an opponent of such high rank, adding that to join the 11th rank, one must surpass a 10th rank opponent. Guy simply watched his opponent intently. However, Ganes proved to be too weak for Guy. The mage noted that in a one-on-one duel you can usually gauge an opponent's strength, but Ganes was so weak that it was impossible to measure. He gave an example with Uriel, who wouldn't know what to do if she faced 15 babies. He asked his companions if his opponent was truly strong. Uriel replied that as a mere mortal he was strong, but not as a battle mage. Guy pondered whether to finish Ganes in one blow, but doubted if he might be hiding his true strength. He realized he needed to stall for time, but if he used his full power, he would quickly defeat the examiner. The mage was confused and didn't know what to do. The commander noticed the mage's hesitation and chuckled, thinking he had fallen silent out of fear. He suggested that he surrender. But he offered another option. Guy could let Iris fight to study Ganes's strength. He added that if she was also joining their team, her skills would need to be tested and evaluated as well. Iris brightened up and immediately agreed to the commander's order. The commander explained that he couldn't allow weak individuals to join the 11th rank and therefore warned that if they proved unworthy and weak, they shouldn't complain. Noticing Iris's eagerness, he remarked that the girl was far from simple. The mage, on the other hand, was worried about the consequences if the dragon started the duel and pondered how to outsmart the commander before she engaged Ganes in battle. But before he could act, the commander announced the start of the fight between Iris and the knight Ganes. The opponents stood facing each other. Maintaining a stern expression, Ganes asked the dragon if she could handle him, given his high rank. But Iris showed no trace of anxiety about the upcoming fight and clarified that she only needed to defeat the knight. Ganes noticed the girl's carefree attitude, but also her resemblance to a dragon, and became worried. Reiter watched the upcoming fight with doubt and asked the mage if the dragon would be able to gauge her strength in battle. Guy replied that he himself didn't know what Iris was capable of. He stopped the girl, extending his hand in front of her, and warned her that if she made one wrong move, it would all be over. Commander Mayus, sipping tea, noticed the delay in the fight. He smirked and asked the mage if he feared her possible death should she lose the fight. Twirling his mustache, he called them pathetic wandering battle mages. Ganes couldn't help but grin, adding with contempt that their difference in strength was now clear. But Guy just looked at his opponent's audacity with a puzzled expression, thinking to himself that it was more likely he, not Iris, would die, and he was surprised by the knight's foolishness. He suggested an alternative way to demonstrate their skills without a fight. Proposing, for example, target practice, he began looking around, hoping to find suitable items for the alternative. On the columns above the arena was a gleaming statue of Commander Mayus, and Guy suggested it as a target. He ordered the dragon to aim at it and break it. Iris, holding her spear firmly, accepted the mage's command. The commander noticed their focus and called out to them, asking if they were planning to break his statue. Ganes began to reassure the commander, reminding him that his statue was made of a special mithril alloy. Remembering the composition of his statue, the commander continued to drink his tea, understanding that they wouldn't even be able to scratch it. Iris raised her spear, preparing to strike the statue. Throwing the spear down with force, she put all her power into the strike. The tip, heading straight for the statue, left a destructive trail, splitting the ground in two. In the end, the statue split in half. After such a devastating attack, all that remained were clouds of smoke, a pile of rubble, and a destroyed part of the arena. Commander Mayus and Ganes were utterly horrified by such a powerful attack, completely unprepared for its strength and the power of the seemingly fragile girl. Guy looked back at the examiner and asked if Iris should still fight him after what she had demonstrated. Iris, however, joyfully expressed her desire to fight the knight. Ganes was still deeply impressed after the girl managed to break a mithril statue from a distance. Making a decision, the knight refused to fight the little girl as it might seem unethical on his part and released her. He pointed at the mage, announcing that it was now his turn to fight. Guy noted that the knight had found a convenient excuse not to engage in combat with the dragon. He again wondered if the knight was truly conserving his real strength, and if so, he was hiding it very skillfully. Through the dissipating smoke, the mage stepped forward and stood before the knight, who was sitting on his horse, ready to fight him. The commander loudly ordered the knight to attack Guy immediately. Grinning, Ganes raised his axe and, spinning it, declared that he would show the mage his true power. However, Guy noted that the knight had become a little stronger but still hadn't shown any prepared spells. This surprised the mage, who thought it was possible the knight was skillfully hiding his magic too. The knight, shouting, brought a crushing axe blow down on the mage. Meanwhile, the commander watched the battle impassively. He continued to leisurely drink his tea, recalling that the king had ordered not to kill Guy, but only now lazily voiced it. If Ganes didn't hear him, in the commander's opinion, that was his own problem. But suddenly the axe shattered, leaving not a single scratch on the mage. Guy still stood calmly and dispassionately, surrounded by the fragments of what was once a formidable weapon. The axe head hit the ground with a loud clang, and silence fell between the opponents. This unexpected turn of events made the commander choke, spitting tea from his mouth and nose. He was utterly shocked, while Ganes was horrified, realizing he couldn't defeat Guy and had lost his weapon. The mage's companions just watched with a smirk. Guy noted that he hadn't done anything special. The knight's blow was entirely absorbed by his clothes. He explained that enchanting their gear is commonplace for mages. Sighing, Guy began to prepare his attack. He noticed the knight was in shock, making strange noises. He mentally urged him to stop, as it looked like the mage was mocking him. With one powerful kick, he sent the knight flying backward with such force that he fell off his horse, and the horse, startled, looked back at its master in fright. The knight slammed into the wall. The mage noted that he didn't even try to defend himself, but then considered that the knight might have feigned weakness on purpose, as if it were part of his plan. But either way, victory wouldn't be counted unless Ganes surrendered. The mage realized he needed to finish off his enemy. Without moving from his spot, the mage delivered several crushing blows to the knight. With each strike, new splashes of blood erupted from Ganes. Annoyed, the mage asked if the knight was going to surrender to end the fight, but only hoarse groans and the sound of splashing blood came in response. Part of the arena was destroyed and thick smoke rose into the air. The knight, beaten and unconscious, lay on the ground while Guy continued to stand calmly. Ganes's face was swollen and bleeding. The commander was stunned by the grim outcome of the duel. With a sigh, Guy realized the knight had no hidden strength or secret magic, which disappointed him. Nevertheless, he acknowledged his opponent's bravery for fighting to the end despite his weakness. Reiter smirked and asked if that was why the knight didn't surrender, because the mage didn't give him a chance to speak. These words were an unexpected revelation for Guy. Uriel, meanwhile, stood aside, still in a daze from the finished battle. A satisfied smile spread across Guy's face. The trial conditions had been met, and the team gathered before the commander. Now they were supposed to be allowed to form a group. But the commander just clicked his tongue nervously and remarked that many more opponents awaited them, warning them not to get conceited. He chose Uriel as the mage's next opponent and ordered her to fight him. She looked at the commander in confusion. He explained that if they wanted to join the ranks of the 11th tier, they needed to possess strength no less than what they had already shown. Otherwise, he wouldn't allow them to form their own group. The mage was surprised that the commander thought of making the witch fight him, though he also wanted to see her combat potential. Uriel warned that they might damage the arena even more if they started fighting each other. The commander, with a proud posture, adjusted his mustache and reassured the girl. If necessary, he would summon people to create a barrier around them so they could fight without distractions. The girl turned to the mage, wanting to know his opinion on everything that had been said. But Guy was only interested in assessing Uriel's strength and asked if she felt the same in return. She replied that she didn't want to fight a mage, admitting she had no chance of defeating him. Grinning at her concern, he assured her he wouldn't fight at full strength, only test her abilities. Uriel liked his approach and agreed to fight him. The commander ordered Uriel not to hold back and to fight with all her mights. If she didn't give it her all, they would be denied the formation of a group. The mage, with a smile on his face, prepared for the upcoming duel with his partner. The commander then announced the names of their new opponents. Uriel also took a combat stance, maintaining her composure. The commander gave the signal to start the battle. Before starting the fight, the girl cautiously glanced at the commander and repeated his words that they wouldn't hold back in battle. The commander understood what she meant and became wary. After all, if they fought without limiting their power, they could completely destroy the arena. The commander immediately stopped them before they could begin the fight. Uriel's warning worked, and the heroes breathed a sigh of relief. The commander ordered all knights of rank 7 and above to assemble. The knight who received the assignment accepted the order and summoned the necessary people. Knights began to rush towards the commander. Arriving at Mayos' command, they surrounded him from different sides and began to erect a protective barrier. The commander, now calm, took his place on the throne. Guy noted that the commander had decided to set up the barrier too late. Uriel, however, was upset that her hints hadn't convinced him, and she sighed in annoyance. The swordsman, with his usual smirk, reminded his partners that the commander was too proud to go back on his word. Meanwhile, Iris was already asleep, nestled on Ryder's shoulder, who carefully held her. 3 hours passed, and there was still no sign of the battle starting in the arena. Iris continued to sleep, but now on the ground instead of her partner's shoulder. A certain artifact hovered over the mage's hand. He explained that if one learned to manipulate their magical power, they could gain a huge advantage in battle. Guy continued, demonstrating to his partners that compressing magic could enhance its spell. Ryder and Uriel watched the mage's actions intently. The girl noted that such a technique required great concentration and endurance. Ryder, looking at the witch, added that it wasn't just about concentration or a mark, but about the results of persistent training that eventually bear fruit. Guy also added that such a technique gives rise to a phenomenon called primeval magic, but in Transcendent magic, this power is far more potent, and he expressed his desire to achieve it. He also mentioned that this could be accomplished by combining the power of several mages. With slight confusion, he noted that even with what they had at the moment, it should result in a rather powerful spell. He was about to continue his thought. But then he was interrupted by the commander, protected by the barrier that the knights continued to create. He demanded that the mages immediately begin fighting each other, complaining about their slowness. Guy merely said, disappointed, that he was hearing such words from someone who had spent so much effort creating the barrier. Uriel added that mages require a lot of time to prepare, even if they can finish a duel quite quickly. One of the knights who was building the barrier informed the commander that they had finished constructing it. Announcing the completion of the structure, they raised the barrier, which glowed brightly in the arena. Satisfied with the protection built around the man, the commander, now clearly carefree, ordered the mages to begin fighting. However, Guy noticed that the barrier was weak and could break from just one shockwave. He already felt the urge to fight and kill the commander instead of battling his partner. Uriel told him that such a decision would only create more problems and advised him not to do it, glancing towards the commander. The mage promised to be more careful but didn't take responsibility for the commander's safety. The witch merely warned him that if the commander died, they wouldn't get permission to form a party, which puzzled the mage. He allowed his partner to go first, crossing his arms and calmly awaiting her actions. The girl smiled and opened a portal that passed through her hand. She then unleashed a series of portals around herself, encompassing her and forming a fan-like shape. The knights watching the start of the duel noted that the witch's magic circles looked very complex. One of them asked his comrade if it was his first time seeing her Comet Fall ability. The other replied that it wasn't his first time seeing the ability, but he noted that it had never been as complex as it was this time. His comrade immediately realized that Uriel wasn't going to summon a falling comet, but a star, which was much more powerful than the first ability, and warned that it could destroy everything around them. Meanwhile, Uriel looked away and sighed, stating that she wouldn't let her opponents see her spell, as that would mean defeat. She also admitted that she had never met anyone who could stop it. Raising her hand to the uppermost magic circle, she invoked her ability. A massive chunk appeared from the sky, hurtling down towards the arena. The commander, seeing the witch's ability, was horrified that such power could kill everyone present. The knights were also terrified by the sight. Guy, however, calmly observed his partner's actions, noting that her spell possessed high destructive power, but only if the opponent wasn't a mage. He continued to watch as the destructive star moved towards him. The air froze, and everything around them was bathed in a blinding light. The commander ordered the knights to reinforce the defensive barrier. Meanwhile, Ryder created a barrier to protect himself and the sleeping Iris. Guy simply smiled at his partner's power and didn't move from his spot. The star crashed into the arena, causing a devastating impact. After the powerful impact, stone debris flew in all directions. Uriel, having attacked, simultaneously took care of her own defense and remained unharmed, as did Reiter, who held the still-sleeping Iris on his shoulder. Under the protective but now cracking barrier, Commander Mayus also remained intact. He ordered the knights to restore the defense as quickly as possible. Amidst the smoke from the fallen star, Reiter and Uriel searched for Guy, already starting to worry that he hadn't survived such an attack. But from the smoke, a silhouette emerged, surrounded by a bright barrier. After creating a protective barrier, Guy managed to survive the witch's attack. He stood calmly, not showing a hint of concern. He noticed that Uriel had to spend a lot of time and preparation to reproduce it quickly enough. The girl, embarrassed, looked away and noted that he hadn't even flinched, admitting that such actions hurt her pride. Magic began to gather around him, emanating from the artifact. He was about to attack and told Uriel to block his strike. The girl noticed that he was holding an artifact, which he used to create magic. Since he had the first mark, his spells were cast slowly, but the artifact he created accelerated the chanting of formulas. Uriel noted the practicality of this solution. The fighting method the mage was about to demonstrate was effective against the second and third marks. He added that this could be considered the foundation of magical warfare. He tossed the artifact into the air and it shot upwards with incredible speed, leaving a smoky trail behind. Uriel watched its movement, gradually understanding what magic Guy was using. The commander, however, warned the mage to be more careful with the direction of his spells, or he would consider it a defeat. While the main spell was being prepared, the mage summoned several more. Uriel noted the multi-layered offense as she observed the magic circles. The commander demanded an explanation for their meaning, assuming that Guy couldn't cast spells normally. Upon opening the magic circles, Uriel realized that even if an opponent concealed their true strength, it could be assessed by their mana flow. The mage directed the attacks from his circles towards the witch. She stood opposite him, watching the approaching strikes. The knights tensely held the barrier, and the commander wondered what spell Guy had used. Surrounded by magic circles, Uriel understood his plan. She recreated a reflective barrier from these circles, which deflected the mage's attacks. The attacks went back, which the knights noticed, calming down and praising the 11th rank with smiles, while Commander Mayus sat stunned. Guy realized that she had anticipated his spell and responded accordingly. He stood calmly in the center of the arena, watching his attacks return. Assessing her abilities, he protected himself with magic circles, but the strikes began to penetrate them. Clenching his hand, the mage triggered a quantum explosion from these magic circles, which his own attacks had pierced, noting that he expected the same from the girl. A series of flashes erupted in the arena, surrounding both opponents. Cracks appeared on the commander's barrier from the impacts. The defense began to crumble, and the knights, along with the commander, were frightened, no longer able to withstand the onslaught. Nevertheless, they continued to hold the barrier, discussing what power the mage had used and doubting that he truly had no rank. They realized it was time to leave. The commander was shocked by the level of the duel, which caused him confusion. With a trembling voice, he shouted at the witch not to dodge his attacks and to strike back at him. Uriel turned around, puzzled, noting that she was already on her feet, which was quite an accomplishment in itself. But she still listened and focused her attack towards the mage, allowing herself a slight smirk. Guy, smiling at her determination, didn't back down. He warned her that the main attack wasn't over yet and caught her off guard. In a hurry, Uriel opened magic circles in front of her, trying to deflect the new blow, forgetting about the opponent's main spell. The mage reminded her that first mark spells require long preparation and advised her to prepare a barrier. The girl understood what the mage meant. A new destructive attack, Meteor Fall, summoned by Guy, was approaching the ruined arena. Upon hearing the name of the mage's spell, the commander let out a mocking chuckle. He found it amusing, as, according to him, this spell was merely a precursor to Uriel's powerful Starfall spell. He saw Guy as a useless mage. The witch, however, was frankly displeased by such audacity and overconfidence in the commander's tone. She noted to herself that he was just an amateur in magical disciplines, yet he spoke as if he knew everything much better. Recalling a past battle where Guy had already used Meteor Fall against Lymine, the girl noticed that his attack back then was much faster and sharper than it was now. She directly asked the mage if he was truly not working at full power. Meanwhile, Uriel continued to maintain a dense magical barrier in front of her, perfectly aware that without it, she probably wouldn't be able to defend against the approaching attack. The mage, catching her observant gaze, smiled back, appreciating his partner's perceptiveness. Guy calmly explained that he was putting in his full strength and nothing in his actions had changed. Both the spell and the amount of mana expended remained the same as always, without any limitations. The girl was still surprised by the details she heard. At that moment, a low hum began to rise in the air, which the commander immediately noticed, assuming it came from the approaching meteor. His guesses were quickly interrupted by one of the knights, who shouted for him to look up immediately. A storm erupted in the sky. A bright, unsettling light began to pierce through the swirling clouds, emanating from the approaching meteor hurtling directly towards them. The air around them froze. Those present in the arena couldn't hide their horror at what they saw. Guy's spell turned out to be several times larger in scale than the witch's similar spell. The knights, barely holding the barrier, realized their strength was running out and that they needed to flee while they were still alive. One of them had already begun to lose consciousness. Guy, as if noticing nothing, explained the peculiarity of his spell. The only difference was how he compressed the magical power. In the battle with the dragon, he reduced the meteor's surface but significantly increased its destructive power. Uriel was genuinely surprised that he was capable of using such destructive magic on such a large scale and controlling its parameters with such precision. She mentally admitted that she still had a long way to go to hone her skills to approach such a level of mastery. The meteor crashed onto the arena with a monstrous roar, causing catastrophic destruction. Literally nothing survived the impact. Even Commander Mayos' statue, which had previously split into two parts and remained standing, was flung aside like a mere toy. The knight's protective barrier couldn't withstand the impact's power and shattered with a crack. Stripped of their defense, the knights themselves were thrown backward, unable to stay on their feet, as was Commander Mayos himself. After landing on the ground, the commander struggled to get up, his appearance completely disheveled, his clothes dusty and torn in several places. He couldn't hide his shock at the power a wandering mage possessed. Looking up, he noticed his broken statue flying straight at him. The heavy mithril statue crashed onto the commander's back with a dull thud. Blood gushed from his mouth from the sharp pain. The knights, noticing this, rushed to him instantly. Meanwhile, among the arena's debris and piles of stones, stood Guy and Uriel, who was still inside the protective barrier. Uriel breathed a sigh of relief as she had only survived thanks to the protection. She realized that Guy seemed to have specifically adjusted the parameters of his spell to her capabilities, so that her strength would be just enough for the block. She asked him if her suspicions were correct. Guy snapped his fingers, acknowledging her perceptiveness, and said that she had indeed learned something from this duel. He asked a rhetorical question about whether it wasn't easier to block a spell when you knew it beforehand, and added that spellcasting speed and tactical thinking in combat were often more important than brute force. The girl suggested that the knights knew the specifics of her falling star, but not Guy's spells. She noted that if he hadn't warned her about his technique beforehand, she definitely wouldn't have survived. Guy once again showed the artifact he used to deliver such a powerful blow and explained that spell delay was the most basic of available techniques, but an excellent way to distract an opponent. However, he admitted that he couldn't keep fighting with such weak techniques and asked if it wasn't time to use something truly serious. At that moment, the commander's trembling hand emerged from the pile of stones as he shouted, trying to stop the mage from that idea. Tears were already glistening on his face and he himself was tightly pinned between the debris. Guy annoyedly reminded the man that he had promised not to allow the creation of his group if he lost, and the fight was not formally over yet. But the commander, with desperation and tears in his eyes, shouted that he would allow them to form their group. He pulled out a pre-prepared document with the permission and showed it to Guy, demanding that he take the paper and finally leave the arena. Guy couldn't hide his surprise, realizing that the commander had had the ready consent all along. However, the mage, still not satisfied with such an ending, asked if he could use one more spell for good measure. The commander's immediate response was a categorical refusal. But the spell was already fully prepared, and Guy felt it was a shame to interrupt it halfway. He declared that he was going to use it, which made the commander scream loudly in terror. The spell turned out to be just a festive firecracker, but having overreacted, the commander lost consciousness and foam came out of his mouth. The knights immediately rushed to him, noticing his critical condition, and promptly called a doctor. Uriel just smiled nervously, watching the scene unfold. Guy was completely satisfied with the outcome of the trial and that he had managed to secure permission. The witch, however, expressed doubts. At that moment, Iris, who had been sleeping, opened her eyes and asked if the trial was over yet. The next day, the heroes were already in the city. Suddenly, someone called out to the mage, apologizing for the sudden intrusion into the building. Guy, who was helping Iris with her reading, was distracted and turned to the guest. It turned out that a knight had arrived to him and his team with news that the king wished to meet with them and asked them to proceed to the palace. Before following the knight, Guy clarified whether the invitation was related to yesterday's duel. The knight replied that he didn't know the exact reason but assured them that they were not going to be accused of anything. Ultimately, obeying the order, Guy and his team appeared before the king. A man in a royal cloak seated on a throne stated that Commander Mayos had apparently crossed the line and offered his apologies for him. He also expressed his gratitude, which greatly surprised the people standing nearby, who asked, "For what?" He's incompetent as a commander but skilled in politics, which made communicating with him very difficult. But thanks to the guys, he understood how to communicate with him. Mayos was called and asked if the information requested by Sir Guy was ready. The man, beaten and covered in fractures and cuts, said he was very sorry about what happened regarding Guy. He couldn't stop him from forming a group. The man on the throne asked what he was talking about. He was referring to how some low-grade mage was now allowed to take 2 11th rank individuals from their kingdom, considering it a terrible loss for them. He found Guy quite stubborn and difficult to deal with. The man asked him to repeat himself, but the injured man had a plan. He would hinder Guy's group formation and expel him from the kingdom. Didn't the name Guy mean anything to Mayos? Guy, he needed to think, the one who defeated the evil dragon when 2 11th rank adventurers couldn't handle it. The man covered part of his face with his hand. He still didn't understand. Did he defeat it, but didn't Reuter and Brill kill the dragon? Wait, was the man saying he was that guy? This information was incredibly shocking. Everything was written in the report they provided him. It seemed the man had missed that part and asked him to overlook it. He had to choose demotion or death. He was surprised. What demotion? His Majesty must know this is too much, so the man chose death. No, His Majesty is too cruel. In the end, he was sent to a small rural territory. This is what happens to those who disobey the king. From now on, this matter would be resolved. This person was certainly flattered by their eagerness to help, but wouldn't it be more sensible to give this job to someone else? This was done to reduce rumors about him. Everything was fine. Oh, I see, that's good. Well, there's hope they'll work out. Now to business. The commander was tasked with gathering all information about the Brotherhood of the Blazing Heavens, but could he also be asked for information about transcendent magic? They had tried to gather it, but it proved more difficult than expected. They needed to understand that they didn't know what to consider transcendent magic and what not to. It's easy to distinguish. If something cannot be described by existing theories of magic, then it is transcendent magic. Then all their artifacts could also be classified as transcendent magic, as they couldn't describe them using their known magical data. The guy apologized, but couldn't he explain how his artifacts worked? No, they couldn't. He turned and asked if that was true. Welcome to this world. Alright, since he was here, he wanted to see what he couldn't understand. It says Royal Treasury at the entrance, but why does it look like a junk storage? No, it's definitely a treasury. For example, just look at this artifact. She believes it holds enough power to be a national treasure. What, a national treasure? The guy turned around and tossed the item over his shoulder, saying it was just trash. The girl was firm in her words, asking, "Trash? It's so beautiful and shiny. It doesn't feel like any transcendent magic, not to mention half the junk they created is in here. If this glowing stone is trash, then she can keep it." The girl started pleading for permission, but no, it's a national treasure. Even though it was faint, magic could be felt. The girls turned in that direction and there was an item in his hand. If you look closely, you can see how magic deforms around the object. This distortion is what cannot be described by conventional laws of magic. It's transcendent magic. The girl was curious what was there. They asked Uriel to tell them what she knew about it, as she had used it when she was in the organization. There's no doubt it's somehow connected to transcendent magic, but it shouldn't be used. This artifact enhances people using transcendent magic, but since it alters the wielder's soul, the chance of dying is also very high. Only 1 person out of 100 can survive this process. 1 out of 100, that's not such a bad ratio. It's worth seeing if you'll die or survive. So it enhances a person's body and abilities by altering their souls. and only 1 in 100 people can survive, right? 1 person out of 100, that's not such a bad chance. It's worth seeing if the guy dies or not. You need to be careful not to inhale the smoke. The guy just watched it all, so that's how it is. This magic, it made the girl feel so bad. The guy said, hey, even for him, this is too much. Yes, because this isn't the magic they use every day. Suddenly, something happened and smoke rose all around. The others started covering their faces while the guy stood in the middle. Is he okay? That's right, transcendent magic can change any soul. That's a better way to describe it. Now the guy is less human and 1 step closer to stellar beings. What could less human mean? The others were very curious, and the guy asked if they wanted him to show them. A bright light shone from the guy's hands, so much so that the others had to close their eyes in surprise. What could it be? He compressed the magic, forming pure energy. This was the fusion of primordial magic, the very fusion he'd talked about learning someday, and now he could use it with a snap of his fingers. The guy had heard that only a select few could do this, and he hadn't expected to succeed on his first try. It was time for a little experiment. Wait, what was he planning? But the guy just said it was merely fireworks. If he lost control of the primordial magic, the kingdom would vanish from the face of the earth. The guy leaned out the window, extended his hand, and released the magic, saying he wouldn't lose control and there was no need to worry. A bright light shone in the sky. Everyone stood silently, waiting to see what would happen. The girl asked if he had just released the magic and then suppressed it, but he told her to just keep watching. Suddenly, something started happening. What was that? Where was such a powerful wind coming from? The girl exclaimed, hey, it's pulling me in. What is this? Something inexplicable began to occur over the city. An incredibly large vortex started tearing everything apart. What's going on? It looks like another magic spell. The girl screamed, hey, someone stop this horror. Such a fusion of primordial magic is extremely unstable and could explode at any moment, which is why the guy made it disappear in that manner. The reason it's completely black is that its gravitational pull is too strong and light cannot escape it. The guy knew that transcendent magic would allow him to compress magic so intensely, but the result looked much better than he'd expected. Such strong gravity that light can't escape. Did he just create a black hole? That's transcendent magic and he really likes it. Alright, that's enough for today. The guy snapped his fingers and the magic ceased. Could he really control such a monstrous force? The guy didn't know how it worked, but he assumed his companion had grown stronger, and he was right. First, they needed to find more similar transcendent magic artifacts, and only then learn how to control them. He clenched his other fist and declared that he would do everything possible to become stronger. To master such power instantly, who exactly is this guy? But it's simple. A few years ago, he conducted research on souls, and it was very similar to when you assemble your own soul. Erasing your soul? Why would he need to do that? He thought that way he could rewrite his mark. The girl didn't understand what he was talking about, but it sounded very painful. Now that he had become stronger with transcendent magic, their next goal would be to search for more similar artifacts. But it seems there are no more here, and for now, they are waiting for information about the Brotherhood. So he suggested they train. How did he feel about that? Did guy want to test their fighting style? She's all for it. During their battle, the girl learned a lot and is looking forward to more training. But hey, isn't it his turn to fight now? The girl modestly raised her hand and mumbled, saying she wanted to train too. Then they should start by checking her strength and skills, using the same principle as he did with Uriel. Uriel would be next. The muscular man cracked his knuckles again, clenching his fist in his other hand, and cheered, hooray. Though maybe it's better to train Iris first. The girl brought her hand to her head in a salute and replied, yes, I understand. Is Iris not too happy about training? No, he just caught her off guard. The event took place the next day under a bright sun. The girl was very nervous. Iris was asked if she was okay, as she looked too tense. Everything's fine, but he'll kill her if she doesn't try her best, and Iris is really nervous about that. She apologized, but Guy didn't know what Iris had just said. He wasn't going to kill her, but he did want to kick her out of the group and definitely thought that since she's a dragon, she could eat them all, so it's better to get rid of her. And is Iris going to eat them all here? The girl got nervous and replied, no, of course not. Even if I wanted to, I could try. She repeated that no, she wouldn't eat the guys. That's good. For now, Iris is stronger than all of them, and since she's a dragon, she can become even stronger. She's not limited by things like marks, for example. So the guy has high hopes for Iris, is that right? The girl immediately beamed at that answer. She blushed and said she was very happy, but since Iris is a dragon, she can't use magic. Why doesn't the girl start her training with magic? What? But she said she can't use magic. Using magic in combat gives a good advantage. Now something needs to be done first. Let her destroy that target with some spell. But the girl can't use magic. Don't talk nonsense. Her dragon's breath is also magic. What? Really? Many dragons think they can't use magic, but in reality, it's completely different. Guy will help her. Let her try to shoot her breath from the staff. She just needs to remember how she does it in dragon form and transfer that feeling to the staff. Iris replied, "Okay, I understand." The girl extended her staff and used magic. It worked. A bright flash shot forward and destroyed the target. While the staff really breathed fire, Iris shouldn't forget that feeling. Iris's eyes lit up as she finally understood. "Excellent, now try again," the guy said. She replied, "Okay," and began. The first time is always the hardest, but no, she couldn't just leave it like that. She was Iris, a dragon. The girl prepared to use her magic, and like a true dragon, she unleashed her breath. It worked from her mouth and on the first try, but Iris couldn't see her target at all. What? Did Iris miss the target? She attacked the target again and again. Why wasn't it working? She wouldn't miss if she got up close. Iris used her magic and delivered a powerful attack. She finally destroyed the target. This wasn't target practice for destruction, though. They were just supposed to be training their magic. That was a bit much. Her skills are impressive, but she needs to understand that she can't hit the target because her own mouth blocks her view of the beam. She's a dragon, so it's easier for her that way, and she needs to realize that. The enemy definitely wouldn't expect that, and he was right, but they needed to make it harder, so they would continue. Next up were the targets, and there were so many of them. Iris wondered, where were they moving? These targets were so fast, making them harder to hit, but the girl wasn't scared. She started attacking the target, causing destruction all around, with rocks flying everywhere. It turned out Iris hadn't hit a single one. The blast completely blocked her view, so she'd better try using a staff instead. Iris pouted, but she had to try again. "Fine, if that's how it is, I'll just incinerate them all at once." The girl attacked her targets, deciding to just increase her combat power instead of aiming. This was not at all what Guy wanted to see, but she succeeded. Magic was very convenient after all. They could call this spell Iris's shot. It was good that she learned to use magic, but he was still giving her 0 points for that. But why? To use that much magic, she first needed to control it. Guy doubted she would hit anyone in a real fight, but it was easier for a dragon that way. The guy said, "All right, we can do a small experiment." He activated his magic. Reiter would be the girl's target, so he could also assess his strength. But the guy felt awkward fighting a little girl. He shouldn't let her appearance deceive him. She was a powerful dragon after all. Guy didn't think he could even wound her, even if he used all his strength. The guy asked, "Is that true? What kind of monster is she?" "All right, let's begin." Whoa, that hit was pretty strong. The guy thought it was too easy. Iris's actions were easy to read. "That's not fair, stop dodging." Now Reiter should try to dodge. What? He was just huge. That attack was incredibly powerful. Her spell is even stronger than last time. Not even Reiter could survive this. The girl wondered if she overdid it, but no, it's fine, he'll manage. When it comes to critical situations, he's unmatched in making quick decisions. Wow, it's the guy's moment to shine. Reiter's technique, drifting blades. The guy used magic to defend himself from Iris's attack. Wave cut. Did he just cut the spell with a blade and dodge the attack? Magic, can it be cut too? What? How is that even possible? In reality, it's not that simple. An ordinary person couldn't pull off such a trick. It seems Reiter is imbuing his blade with magic. It's interesting. Does he do it consciously? In theory, he's doing the same thing Guy does when blocking enemy spells, but believe it or not, he can do it and most likely doesn't even understand how it works. The guy went on the offensive. Now it was his turn. Is something wrong with little Iris? He offered her a candy, knowing she loves sweets. She was delighted by the treat, started cheering, and confirmed it was indeed sweet. He bet that with a candy in her mouth, the dragon wouldn't be able to shoot. What happened? So he even came up with a tactic to neutralize Iris. No, she wasn't going to spit out the candy, it was too delicious. But she needed to use magic and Iris couldn't. The guy laughed, she was trapped. What the? Is the girl channeling magic through her staff? The candy was still in her mouth and the girl grabbed her staff to get out of the situation, attacking Reiter. A huge explosion occurred, sending chunks of rock flying everywhere from the powerful recoil, so strong that it knocked the guy aside. The girl finally learned how to use her staff. She called it Iris's shot, which had reached its limit. Well, Reuter's plan failed. No, on the contrary, it helped the girl develop. Since she couldn't open her mouth, she decided to use the staff after all. This is a pretty good way to make her use it. Honestly, the guy wouldn't have thought of that. Reuter didn't expect her to be able to do that, so he was counting on his victory. The girl called Reuter and he responded. She was asking for more candy. The guy laughed and gave her the treat. Iris is happy to be in this group. Since she learned to use magic, he assumes their goal for today has been achieved. But wait, what's bothering the girl? The dragon has become even stronger. Creatures dwelling in the vastness of space, spirits of burning stars, they grow stronger in their endless lives by taking the power of defeated enemies. Those among them who have won countless times surpass even gods in their knowledge and power. It's unbelievable, even Guy can't wound him. The guy's mana is almost depleted. The fight was tough. Guy didn't expect such a difference between them. There's no time, they'll have to use their trump card. Dark Dragon Iris will save this world. Maybe the guy should ask more respectfully. He said, please save us, Lady Iris. All right then, let the enemy have it. The girl activated her magic, Iris's flame, and he started screaming in pain after the attack. That's it, no one can compare to Iris. The guy has nothing left to teach her now. They expected less from her. Reiter will arrange a feast with sweets for Lady Iris. Her eyes lit up, sweets. The girl was overjoyed. Wow, so sweet. It got to the point where Iris confused the guy, saying, this candy is so big. He remained silent. Damn it, Reiter thought his plan was good back then, but it seems the girl only remembers him because he's associated with candy. The girl thought she had a lot of candy. She was very upset when she realized it was just a dream. How cruel. And Reiter is cruel too. Why wake her up when she was having such a wonderful dream? Well, because the girl was biting so hard that she left marks. Where are the guys heading? Guy just wants them to see something. Before their real battle begins, the guy wants to show them something. This is an observatory, right? Yes, our magic telescope is just really good. So they'll be able to see the power emanating from the spirits of the blazing stars. The power from the spirits of the blazing stars. Is the guy talking about the spirits of space? There are many such spirits in space. Their battles have been going on for over 1 billion years. What? 1 billion years? He can't even imagine it. From here you can see those very spirits that are 200,000 light years away from them. They were invited to take a look. She only sees something shiny. Those are the spirits of the blazing stars. Impressive, right? The guy was asked to look here. From here you can see 200,000 light years away. That's just a monstrously huge distance, and if they can observe their power from here, you can understand how enormous it is. If Guy continues with his boring lecture, Iris will fall asleep again. He was surprised. What? Boring. Wait, what is she doing? The girl somehow associates Reiter with candy and bites him every time she's sleepy. Guy replied, all right then, I can show them in a way they'll understand. She woke up and asked, huh? Iris wondered what had happened here. The guy looked around and said, so this is what space looks like. What they could see through the telescope, he simply transferred into their three-dimensional space. Iris looked at everything happening around her. So what exactly is this thing? Well, it's a spirit of the blazing stars. The guy adjusted its size a bit so they could understand it better. He's about to devour an entire planet. He swallowed a planet roughly the size of Earth in one bite. That's just how powerful they are. They can find other spirits near their planet and their power will be no less than this one. It turns out there are a lot of spirits, wow. This is only 200,000 light years away from us, which means by the time it reaches us, it will be even stronger, or it will be devoured by something more powerful. This is what power means in the context of the cosmos, and he wants to acquire such power to stand against them. The guys are on a completely different level of understanding power compared to them. Still, they have a long way to go before they can even meet them. Exactly, without preparation, they have no business competing with them. Reuter is right. The guy doubts they could defeat even the weakest spirit right now. And the concept of weak is quite broad. All the weak ones have long since been devoured by stronger ones. After all, they've been existing and fighting for over 1 billion years. Therefore, the only way is to get closer to their power, and that's transcendent magic and nothing else. Guy simply agreed. To start, they need to get closer to the transcendent magic of the Brotherhood of Blazing Heavens. Transcendent magic is different from their human magic. The spirit's power doesn't disappear even after their death. The Brotherhood probably managed to obtain the corpse of a spirit that once fell on their planet. Then they were able to extract transcendent magic from it, compatible with humans, and seal it into artifacts, similar to the ones the guy used last time. And since they can infuse such power into objects, they can also mass-produce them. In other words, to gain power from an artifact, you need to defeat a miniature version of the spirit sealed inside. If the guys find the Brotherhood's lair, they can find information about people who successfully obtained the magic and about the artifacts they created. So Guy just wants to take them all for himself. He agreed with the girl's assumption. The kingdom will soon prepare a report for them. It would be great if they could find one of their hideouts nearby. She's right. It seems the king is in his chambers. He should go see him. How does he know this? Guy used detection magic. The head of security would faint if he knew what the guy was up to. The guy apologized for intruding and asked for permission to enter. Lord Guy was asked if he found anything he liked in his treasury. Indeed, there was one item related to transcendent magic, and His Majesty was glad to help. If it weren't for his help, this kingdom would have been destroyed by the dragon Lymine a long time ago. But he doesn't want to repay the young man's help with such a small thing. If Guy needs anything else, he just has to say so. He only needs information about transcendent magic. Have they gathered information about the Brotherhood as the young man requested? They are collecting information based on one of their lairs they once found, and they are currently verifying its accuracy. So the lair was likely abandoned because of Lymine. And what are their chances of finding anything? Unfortunately, it was completely wiped out with almost no traces left, so there are no leads. That's why His Majesty said they were verifying the information. However, the soldiers sent back there never returned. So they believe that since the soldiers haven't returned, it might be their active lair. Guy confirmed this with a yes. They will go there themselves. Can His Majesty tell him where it is? He handed Guy a map, asking him to accept it as a token of gratitude. He regrets putting the young man in such danger, but he wants to somehow pay for his help. Guy said it wasn't necessary, as he was grateful for all the information he had just provided. According to the map, they should be right in front of the lair. The girl wants to ask about what the king said. The dragon Lymine appeared at the same time the destroyed Brotherhood lair was discovered. Could it be that Lymine was a creation of the Brotherhood? Guy doubts it. The amount of transcendent magic he possessed was too negligible. It seems he acquired it purely by chance. Suddenly, Guy noticed something. It looks like the guys have finally arrived. Another 5.2 kilometers in that direction. Guy feels strange mana flows from there. He can sense it if he concentrates, but it's so far away that it's very difficult for him to pick up anything. And he's right, there's something strange there. The only thing he can say is that he has a bad feeling and they are good at hiding, too good. Their mana is too inconspicuous. Uriel doesn't detect anything at all. The girl asked what the guys thought. Have they noticed them yet? They are not as weak as the guys think. They are stronger than these two. Oh, Uriel is already looking forward to meeting them. From everything the young man could sense, that person is good at fighting. Can he really do that? And if the girl uses her attack form, do they think they'll notice Iris? No, of course they won't notice a huge dragon. It's better to fight in human form. Guy wants her to get used to it. Guy said they are stronger than the guys, so should they even go to them? They are a perfect target for practice. But it doesn't look like they'll attack first, so the guys will go say hello. Even though they've made the first move, they're not actually doing anything. What are these opponents planning? They don't seem hostile, but they're not friendly either. Could it be that the group has encountered an honest battle mage? No, if that were the case, they would have definitely done something by now. They called out to Guy. Guy wonders if these could be people like her who have turned away from the organization. That's certainly possible, but if so, they would have surely taken some action. Perhaps they should be the first to show friendliness. Someone asked for permission, wondering if they could. What is he doing here, especially in such a deserted place? The person was sitting right on the grass under a tree, surrounded by birds. She was just hungry and decided to hunt some edible monsters. There are 2 monster bowls over there. The girl thanked Guy for the information. Actually, the monsters are about 1 kilometer away from here. He has the 3rd mark, which is perfect for long-range attacks. Considering this, he can kill them from here without much trouble. The monsters might run away. Won't she kill them? People are a rarity in this area. She just doesn't recall seeing these guys before. Guy doesn't feel any hostility. Could they really have stumbled upon a benevolent battle mage? Suddenly, out of nowhere, Guy was attacked. He noticed it and the attack was too close. To fend off the assault, Guy used magic and the others watched. A bird was caught in the powerful magic currents and torn to pieces. a meat grinder, a spell that rips the target apart from the inside. The guy is well informed, such spells are her specialty, and Guy dodged it by pure chance. As a combat spell, it offers no benefit, but its cruelty is unimaginable, as such pain is unbearable. So who is he? You shouldn't answer a question with a question. Guy asked first, but it doesn't matter anymore, the girl will answer them. She is Lymine from the Brotherhood of the Blazing Heavens. They don't need to remember, as the dead have no need for memory. She wants to start with the weakest among them, and the girl attacked with a deadly spear of light. Iris gasped and the team worried about their ally. That hurt, by the way, why so sudden? But what about the defensive spell? It could stop the killing spell, which is incredible because Iris doesn't use any defensive magic. It's just that her spell, designed to kill people, lacks the firepower to kill a dragon. Guy thinks that since he hired 2 rank 11 adventurers, he can handle the girl. It seems this man knows about Uriel and Reiter, or perhaps he misunderstood something. Well, the guy still has the first mark, so Guy is definitely weaker than her. Guy feels an otherworldly magic emanating from this person, as if it has permeated his soul, but what it is exactly is impossible to say for sure right now. Damn it, he needs to stop dodging. Maniac specializing in the meat grinder spell. Guy wonders if he was always like this or if otherworldly magic changed him. Alright, he needs to check something. He'll leave the opponent to Uriel, Reiter, and Iris. This is the perfect opponent for training. Let the guys work together and defeat him. Iris should fight in this form. Everything became clear to them. Reiter rejoiced and said, "Let's fight." But Iris doesn't like fighting in this form, it's inconvenient. An opponent for training, I'm the one with the first mark, you're a good joker, the opponent laughed. He's about to send these guys to another world. Reiter always reacts quickly. Before he would just rush forward, but now he has to coordinate his movements with his allies. The opponent will stop. Come on, these two need to act now. Reiter stopped the enemy with his defensive strike. Uriel and Iris will attack him from a distance. Pretty good coordination for a newly formed group. Meteor fall, Iris's flame. The opponent tried to use magic to deflect the attack. The guys attacked and destruction was all around. Uriel thinks they hit him, but that's not the case. The opponent used a defensive spell and took no damage. That girl's magic is quite curious, and the other one's spell doesn't even belong to a human. Since he unlocked the attack, he has plenty of experience. Reiter wouldn't train with someone weaker than him. Although the enemy looks quite strong, he's actually worried about himself. It seems he could easily block Uriel's spell, but Iris's spell cost him a lot of mana. And what did she want from the dragon? Her spell might look weak, but its combat power is incomparable. Forcing the enemy to spend mana on defense is a pretty smart tactic for them, though it doesn't seem like they can keep it up for long. Most likely, the enemy will soon change his tactics. Alright, to hell with them, the opponent said. Let's play. Guy thinks this is just a provocation. Does the owner of the third mark want to cross swords with the fourth? It'll be fun, he'll entertain the opponent. The guy uses the lightning ball magic. Damn, Reiter didn't expect that at all. Lightning Ball is an electric-type spell. It's not weak, but it's not strong enough to kill Reiter. Its negative effect is paralysis, and any movement in close combat decides everything. The opponent attacked and said, "Die." A lightning ball, what the heck, so that's what the guy was trying to do. This spell is too weak to kill Reiter, but it's enough to paralyze him, and in close combat, every second counts. The opponent screamed "Die" and attacked Reiter. Everyone was scared for their ally when they saw it. Blood splattered, damn it, Reiter, he got hurt. The girls were really worried. The opponent was pleased with his victory and licked his blade. The first one's down, he thought, when suddenly a blow landed. It was Reiter who had gotten back up and swung his sword. Damn, he dodged it, that was close. They asked Reiter if he was okay. He explained it was just one of his strategies. He had healing runes all over his body, so if the wound wasn't fatal, he definitely wouldn't die. He also mentioned that sigils could have been used instead of runes. So that's how it was. Even the obvious panic on his face was part of the plan to deceive the opponent. Guy hadn't expected him to be so good at battle planning. In any case, the enemy dodged and wouldn't fall for such a trap a second time, especially since Reiter had used too much mana healing that wound. Man, most people aren't as cautious as Reiter. At this point, they had 1 win and 1 loss. The enemy had spent a decent amount of mana defending against Iris's flame, then engaged Reiter in combat, all to prevent the girl from shooting her own opponent. In a mage battle, reducing the opponent's mana is normal. Whoever runs out of mana first loses. Draining the opponent with Iris's spell was the best plan, but Guy doubted it would work a second time. Now all the rivals are waiting to see who will strike first. They've taken up their weapons. And once again, the opponent won't fall for it a second time. He activated the lightning ball. Clearly, it means he'll try again. Even if Reiter tries to pull off that trick a second time, the enemy already knows his moves in advance. There's nothing wrong with a repeat attempt. He's no fool, that's right. Reiter can imbue his weapon with magic to stop the spell, so the first time he deliberately took the lightning hit. Wow. But still, letting the enemy attack first isn't the best move, or does he have some new plan after all? If that's the case, then they can just cut each other down right here and now. Reiter held his weapon and the opponent said, "This guy is starting to amuse me." The girl told Uriel she could help, but then she'd hit Reiter. What should they do if the guy doesn't get an advantage? Then the girl will use her magic. That option is good, yes, they have no other choice. Even if Iris had hit Reiter, he wouldn't have died, but the extent of the damage was unknown. In this situation, such a move was dangerous. They wanted to help him, but didn't know how. Reiter told him to just wait, he would win this battle no matter what. There was a powerful blow, and the young man wondered if it had worked. A lightning orb, damn it! Uriel and Reiter are far from weak, but all their battle experience is focused solely on monsters. Looking at their fight, it's clear they're trying to end things with one powerful strike. Such attacks are effective against high HP monsters, but when the opponent has their own fighting style, it all becomes meaningless. Their enemy, however, specializes in much less striking power. It doesn't matter if he's an assassin or something else, but he's an expert at fighting people. For Reiter, this is the worst possible scenario. Although he's currently conserving mana in close combat by deflecting Reiter's attacks with his sword, he'll strike with magic at the opportune moment. Reiter, on the other hand, expends a significant amount of mana with each of his strikes. At this rate, Reiter will soon deplete all his mana. The fourth mark is very good, but in this case, the advantage isn't on his side. Hopefully, he understands this perfectly well. What's wrong with him? Maybe he should just give up and die quickly. The young man has no chance against him. Alright, so be it. He'll kill Reiter in the most painless way, but the young man ordered him to shut up. The young man said, "Eat this," and activated his magic. It was a double wave slash. How can he not understand such simple things? Didn't he realize that after his attack, he would become too vulnerable? The enemy is aiming directly for his neck. Reiter won't have time to dodge. If the young man is decapitated, he won't be able to activate healing. This is bad. A lightning orb. He was almost done with it. How dare he? Reiter said he owed Uriel and thanked the girl. Reiter shouldn't even think about trying to kill the opponent with one blow. This is a thinking person, not a stupid monster. So that's it, a stupid monster, huh? He wondered if he could change his fighting style now. Reiter replied that he understood everything. The young man thought he hadn't noticed. Wow, he put in much less mana, but his attacks were still useless against his opponent. He said, "Hey, Reiter didn't make the lunch he planned just now. How dare he deceive me?" The less mana Reiter uses, the more often he can cast spells. So how does it feel to fight against a fourth mark? So he understood everything. Reiter's cognitive abilities before critical moments are simply astonishing. The simplest option for fourth marks is to defeat the opponent, meaning to strike him down with a flurry of fast, weak attacks. You bastard, Reiter won't be able to defeat him with his cheap tricks. Don't forget that the girls are still here. The enemy won't be able to escape. It's funny, yes, they fought against monsters, so they have no experience in dueling with humans, but the girls know what they're doing. Damn, her spell casting speed is simply amazing. Wait, did she prepare them in advance? They want to beat him at his own game, and the guy fell for it, but you shouldn't underestimate your opponent. What's happening? Is that a rock? Funny, Iris came up with a pretty good idea. Lifting them is already a problem, but with her strength, it's no big deal. Maybe it's time for the opponent to stop getting distracted. Reiter's sword technique, cross flash. Reiter started celebrating, and so did the girls. The guys pulled it off. Considering they had only relied on brute force before, it's quite surprising they managed to learn from their mistakes and devise a battle plan against him. After all, a real god is much better than simple training, but it's not over yet. It's all over. Let the opponent tell them everything he knows about the Brotherhood of Blazing Heavens. Oh my, these guys are really amusing. How haven't these guys realized it's a trap yet? Bonds of Darkness. He concealed his wounds, meaning Reiter's plan backfired on him. This spell is stealthy and activates upon incantation, but it's not particularly strong. Damn, their eyes are damaged. The guys can't see anything. Did he blind everyone? Did he aim for everyone's eyes? Everything went exactly as the guy planned, but judging by the fact that he spent more mana on Iris, she's the one he fears the most. He really is a good assassin. He hasn't fought like this in a long time. For the time he's wasted, the opponent will send them all to hell. Fire Explosion, long to prepare, consumes a lot of mana, but it's a dangerous and powerful spell. It's the perfect option to finish off the opponent. They can say goodbye to their lives. He used magic and activated Fire Explosion against his opponent. Everyone immediately tried to shield themselves from the attack to minimize the damage. The explosion was incredibly powerful. A thick smoke rose and rocks and large boulders flew everywhere. Even though fighting an 11th rank opponent is tough, in the end, it's business as usual. That guy's guidance didn't even help them. People will never become stronger under someone else's command. Speaking of him, where's that guy? Oh, what happened? Is that magic? The guys did great, they really tried their best. The guy asked if everyone was okay. Is that a magic barrier? Are you telling me some mage with a pathetic first mark was able to block his fire explosion? Reiter apologized for the guy's failure and their loss to the opponent. Iris was rubbing her eyes, they were tearing up, making it impossible to see. The kids just don't have enough experience, that's all. Fighting people and fighting monsters are very different. Even though there were 3 of them, Reiter did most of the work. They barely functioned as a group, so even just understanding their mistakes counts as excellent training. The opponent started yelling threats, saying he'd cut them to pieces. How could they talk as if they'd already won? No need to worry, guy will handle it from here. What, just one light sword? It looks like the guy really is the weakest among them. So was it just luck that guy's barrier withstood the explosion? Guy decided he would only use spells of their level, otherwise it wouldn't be training. What is he talking about? Hasn't the opponent realized yet that guy is just weakening himself to fight him properly? Who do they even think he is? Who allowed a weakling like Guy to be in charge here? Yes, his spells might be weak, but his technique is flawless. If he doesn't like it, then he should show what a real fight is and Guy will remove the limiters. Wow, even so, Guy pulled out his weapon and said, let's see. They attacked the guy, and Uriel worried about Guy as he dodged the attack. Was that a shadow strike? He used an improved version of the Bonds of Darkness on the kids. Even though the opponent is arrogant, he tried to kill Guy before he could do anything, which makes him an excellent assassin. Guy noted that it was a good low blow, and the opponent just cursed in response. He's not letting his guard down. Well, mages with the first mark can only survive by constantly fleeing the battlefield. Guy would gladly fight him one-on-one, but alas, this is just training, so he can't let the kids just watch. What's the plan now? Spells on Uriel and Iris. Reiter shouldn't pay attention to their spells, he should just attack. That way they'll finish everything in one go. They ask Guy what the plan is now. Uriel and Iris will handle the spells. Reiter shouldn't pay attention to their spells, he should just attack. That way, the kids will finish the fight in one go. What, is he serious? Uriel should use Meteor Fall, and Iris should use Iris Flame, while Reiter just attacks. The kids need to show what victory means. But is Guy sure, and is Uriel doubting their victory? That's how it is, because that's how the kids have been acting until now. If Reiter goes into close combat again now, Iris and she won't be able to use spells without harming him. The thing is, Reiter was fighting alone back then, so their combat power will be reduced. If he could just step away for a bit so the others could attack, then they would have a chance. Uriel thinks his strategy is a losing one, but she's still not sure. If the guys focus on the number of attacks, they'll become weaker, and it will be easier for the enemy to defend against them. This means he'll easily find an opening to attack and strike with a powerful spell himself. Now, considering all this, which plan would be better if we consider it better? Does Iris know the answer to this question? She got nervous, or maybe Guy will kill him. But the guy won't get involved in this fight. For the others, the best plan right now would be to use Iris's flame. It can destroy magic and is hard to block, forcing the enemy to spend a lot of mana defending against it. However, the opponent can simply dodge, so they need to prevent him from doing that. So how do they do it? Maybe Iris knows. She mumbled something incoherent. She thinks Reiter should do everything he can to take the hits himself. The guy said, "Hey, what evil has he done to Iris?" Iris apologized to the guy for that answer, but Guy, on the contrary, praised her, which was surprising. Guy simply said the answer was correct. The girl was delighted, saying, "Yes, I knew it," but the guy asked her to stop lying. Doesn't she want to team up? It'll be easier to show than to explain. Yes, the opponent has been waiting for them. Are they done with their negotiations already? The day is almost over. And anyway, they think they can defeat the guy if that guy with the first mark joins them, but the opponent shouldn't let his guard down. Yes, he can only use basic spells, but he also dispels the spell that the guy is constantly trying to cast, and guy is very observant. Then great, the opponent believes he no longer needs to hold back. Everyone got ready for the fight. So the guy just needs to always distract the opponent, while Iris and Uriel hit him with spells. So even if the guy gets hit by their spells, he still has to stand his ground until victory. Did he understand correctly? Almost, but generally correct. The girls won't hit him, so there's no need to worry about that, just trust Guy. Is he serious? Riedo will most likely be the one to deliver the final blow. Just as the guy said, there's no need to pay attention to their spells and Riedo should fight all out. He didn't quite understand what was said, but if Guy says so, then that's how it should be. Alright, let's go. Riedo charged at the enemy, weapon in hand. What is Riedo thinking? It seems he's gotten stronger and the enemy noticed it. Riedo doesn't know it, but this time the enemy will definitely die. Let Uriel and Iris start, but will the guy be okay? Yes, there's no need to worry about him, so go ahead. The girls began activating their magic. Meteor Fall, Iris's flame. What though? Did the girls decide to sacrifice their teammate to defeat him? Damn, I need to put up a barrier quickly, but not that fast. Without it, he'll die too, but he doesn't know anything. Riedo was only told to interfere with him and that the guy wasn't in any danger. Damn it, if this goes on for too long, what's with him? Is the enemy scared? Damn it, how can this be? Why is the guy still unharmed? What kind of nonsense is this? What in the world is happening? What's that? A barrier. They put a barrier on him. No, he did it. That guy with the first mark guy was smiling as he watched the fight. Whatever, a simple barrier like that won't be enough to stop their spells. What a new barrier. That can't be. Are they saying that guy renews his barrier every single time? It's hard to believe that he doesn't even slow down in casting spells and still puts up so many defensive barriers. But first marks are usually slow. Guy can't be capable of something like that. It's not as difficult as it seems at first glance if you can predict the outcome of the battle. Considering Guy has already seen how the enemy fights, he doesn't think the strategy will change or that new skills will be used. Nonsense, it's impossible to predict a fight with such accuracy. He'll never believe it in a million years. Well, maybe it's impossible, but he's pulling it off and his opponent's wounds are already starting to slow him down. Riedo swung again, wounding his opponent even more severely and blood spurted out. Damn. Honestly, Riedo had mixed feelings about it. He didn't think it would be so easy to predict, and his opponent was badly wounded. It was time to finish him off, but the opponent insisted he wouldn't die that easily. The young man attacked again with Riedo's sword technique, Cross Flash. Blood gushed from everywhere on the opponent's body as a powerful blow struck, sending everything flying. After that strong explosion, the shockwave even reached the others, who shielded themselves from the recoil. They peered through the smoke, wondering where Riedo was. Guy said he was fine. Guy was right, the young man wasn't even scratched. They had each only used one spell. Did he know from the very beginning that it would end this way? He was curious about his actions, the opponent's actions. Could he really predict all of this? Yes, Guy had already seen the others fight and understood their opponent's actions and attacks, so predicting everything else wasn't that difficult. Knowing this, Guy had prepared a bunch of barriers in advance. Yes, that's right. Analyzing one's combat capabilities is very important. If you know your allies' abilities and observe the enemy well in battle, even simple spells like these will be incredibly valuable. The young man wished Uriel would take on this role, but she didn't think she could ever do it like Guy. That's because she simply lacks combat experience for now. Besides, he wasn't talking about the present, these were just plans for the future. Since Riedo has the fourth mark, his specialization is close combat, so that's all he should focus on. Since she's a dragon, the girl isn't suited for complex spells. Iris understood, meaning she would need to use simple and powerful spells. That's true, but if she studied magic theory and could better control her mana, they would be able to use stronger spells. Studied? Why doesn't she just try to study hard for at least a month? By study hard, Guy means spending the entire day on studying except for sleep, and yes, Iris will be allowed to eat while studying. When it comes to magic theory, Riedo knows and understands it better than all three of them. His sword technique doesn't just rely on strength. Apparently, he created it based on the principles of magic. The same goes for the runes on his body. They are well made but based on theories considered old. He's also pretty good with paperwork, even if you wouldn't guess it, but the guy looks like a real scholar. They finally won and can go home, but the girl is hungry. What is she talking about? They just started. They came here to find the Brotherhood's lair and take their magic. That's exactly right. All their other hideouts are abandoned. This is the only place they even assigned a guard to, and the three of them couldn't defeat him on the first try. Doesn't it seem like the entrance should be somewhere around here? She can't see anything, but she feels like there's something here. It's hard to say. Guy doesn't sense any concealment spells, so the entrance is probably underground. Now they need to try a detection spell and then see if they find anything. He uses magic and tries to make sense of what he sees. Such a large place was under their feet the whole time. It looks like the lair was built beneath the buildings that used to be here. Since the entrance is found, the others should follow him. Reuter swung his weapon and struck. The group approached the ruins, and there was the entrance. Well, they can go in now. Yes, the place where Uriel was looked exactly like this. Only the higher-ups had access to the underground facilities. Reuter doesn't sense anyone alive here. The guy agrees. The detection spell didn't find anyone either. That's good, so there's nothing to fear, right? Uriel called out to Iris, telling her there was a trap, but she was hit by an attack and turned to her ally. Iris responded and asked how the dragon girl was doing. It would have been much better if they had been warned about such things in advance. That's true, and Uriel apologized. But Iris is a dragon, so there's no need to worry. Still, it's a bit unpleasant. Whoever set these traps certainly wasn't expecting a dragon, so this whole path, yes, it's full of traps despite its appearance. For everyone's safety, Guy will first set up a barrier, and then they'll continue on their way. Even though there are plenty of traps here, they can be dealt with without magic. Uriel agrees. They look much easier than the fight they had upstairs. It's quite strange to think that the traps here are the main objective, considering they left an assassin upstairs. They're only designed to slow them down. They've arrived. Is this a barrier? The team explores the Brotherhood's lair. At the end of a corridor full of traps, they find a door with a barrier. It seems like it should be protecting something valuable, but Guy's intuition tells him that's not the case. If this barrier needs to be broken, Reuter can help. But is all this really for protection against intruders? It's unknown what's behind this door. There's hope for treasure or food in there, but the door doesn't look like a vault. So what should they do? Reuter can't just smash it. No way, he's too fragile for a barrier. Could this also be a trap? There's some really strange magic on the barrier, the guy thought. Strange magic? Maybe a curse? No, it doesn't look like one, but if that's the case, there must be a device here tuned to such magic. He'll try to find out now. They should wait a bit. He activated magic detection. While the three stood waiting for the results, Guy used magic to scan everything around them. There's a mana compression device down there. To think Guy could sense it from such a faint mana flow. These types of traps are very common in places like this. If the magical connection between the door and the device is broken, the trap will activate and blow everything up. Then they can say goodbye to all the goodies inside. The trap immediately activated, leaving about 10 minutes until the explosion. And how exactly did it activate? The guys hadn't even touched the door yet. It seems that because of that assassin upstairs, this device receives another signal from outside, and that signal was just cut off. What do you mean, until the explosion? They need to get out of here as fast as possible. The team has about 10 minutes, so how will they escape? Iris can transform into a dragon and everyone can fly on her back. Iris had a good idea. She's smart, but the guy grumbled and asked if he could speak. Maybe something's wrong. If the guys need to leave quickly, why not use magic? Iris agreed, apologizing. She just thought he looked so calm that Uriel didn't think he'd want to run away. Guy apologized, saying it just seemed like since they had about 10 minutes, there was no need to rush. She screamed, Iris is falling straight down, but there's no need to worry. The guy created a barrier. Where are they? The girl told Uriel to look over there. They're not far from the entrance where they started. Why did the guy teleport them here? They were supposed to get away from that place. It's fine. Guy won't let anything explode. This place is a valuable source of information about the Brotherhood. There must be a lot of clues about them and their work here. That's why he'll stop the device. Is he going to break it and teleport it far away? The guy used magic, took a stance, and started waving his hands. A whole bunch of birds flew around. The birds flew over the surface, gathered around the area, and began to descend into it. So they're disassembling the ground, right? But whatever they peck it disappears, meaning they're storing it. Yes, it's storage magic. Items are disassembled, placed into a special space, and then reassembled there. However, it's incredibly mana-intensive. Even though the guy makes it sound simple, in reality, they could have stopped or broken the device, but that would have severely damaged the lair. And if they lost the information, they'd be left with nothing. The girl never thought storage magic could be used like this. It's good when things aren't stored in your pockets. The team had already dug down to the device, with about 5 minutes left until the explosion. The team entered a room where something very unusual was happening. Guy led the way, with the others behind him. This is what the device looks like. The guys looked towards it. The magic inside seems very dark and unpleasant, similar to what Guy showed them in the treasury. What was it called? The fusion of primordial magic. Yes, but the guy had everything under control there, whereas here, everything is already set to explode. They need to disarm it. If they carefully release the magic outwards, the device won't explode. This device was built with exceptional precision. It seems it wasn't originally intended to blow up this place at all. It could have initially been used for other purposes where something is required from primordial magic. Guy is curious to know if Uriel has ever seen anything similar. It seems so. There was one time. It was probably in the lair where the girl was. It was made to extract primordial magic and pass it through one's body. This was supposed to affect the soul and make the owner stronger, at least that's all Uriel heard back then. In short, devices of this type were designed to introduce primordial magic into a person's soul. This would temporarily grant immense power but greatly distort the soul and personality. The girl is well aware they figured out how to make Uriel stronger. The girl hummed, just hoping he wouldn't say it was once one of Guy's experiments. No, the Guy's experiments are based on different methods. Transcendent magic also affects the soul. This device and transcendent magic are somewhat similar. The Guy asked what they thought would happen if transcendent magic was used on an already corrupted soul. Uriel couldn't even imagine it. She felt the soul wouldn't be able to withstand it. But what if he told them that transcendent magic could compensate for all the soul's shortcomings? There's a high chance that if successfully absorbed, one could become stronger. Uriel turned to the girl and asked what was wrong as Iris sneezed, accidentally releasing her flame. He asked if she was serious right now. If Iris sneezes right now, she could unleash the Iris flame. Uriel told her to quiet down, saying they didn't need the Iris flame right now, but suddenly the girl sneezed anyway. The girl called out to Guy, who immediately activated his magic. The recoil was so powerful that it surprised everyone. Iris started apologizing frantically, but it seemed everything was fine. The girl had scared everyone, and the Guy never thought the Iris flame would have such a drawback. Uriel drew the Guy's attention to what was happening, as everyone was extremely frightened. The girl became upset, realizing it was because of her Iris flame, and started getting so nervous that she cried. Mana from the device was spiraling out of control. There was too much mana, and it wasn't a good sign. Some incredible magic formed above the group, scattering in all directions. Uriel decided to try sealing it all with a barrier, so she used her magic. The pressure was too intense. Even though she kept adding more layers of protection, the mana still broke through no matter what. Uriel stretched her hands forward and activated her magic to protect herself and her allies. The girl fell to the ground with a gasp, realizing it was out of control. They needed to retreat immediately. Uriel was grateful that the girl had slowed it down, as it helped a lot. The rest was up to Guy. He activated his magic, preparing to protect himself and the others. What was Guy planning? Was he trying to compress the mana using transcendent magic? Exactly. If the Guy could compress the mana and regain control over it, Guy would bring the device back to normal. The group looked ahead, and Uriel said that the fusion was absorbing all the mana. The sphere, with its immense energy, began to shrink rapidly until it completely vanished. Guy managed to restore the device's balance. If they returned the original mana and repaired the device, it could be used again. Uriel never thought it could be controlled, but the Guy had done it once before. Without that experience, he would have had a tough time. Iris was very sorry and promised to be more careful. The Guy then spoke her name. Now the girl understands why it's important to control her own mana, and she needs to study hard to keep it in check. She said okay and would do her best. In any case, what just happened had nothing to do with Iris's fire. They're counting on her. The device just broke on its own. It seems it's time to finish the excavation. The guys should go and see what's inside. They even used detection magic but found nothing useful. No food, no treasures. This burnt piece of something could have been a document, but it's completely incinerated, unfortunately. If it had turned to ash, Guy could have restored it, but this ash is so fine it's impossible to restore. Can the guy really restore things from ash? All that's left here is trash. The Brotherhood abandons their hideouts more thoroughly than the guy thought. The only thing left here is the mana compression device. Considering the abilities of the assassin guarding the base, it's clear the explosion wasn't part of their plan. The assassin's abilities are much stronger than the combined power of two 11th rank adventurers and a dark dragon. It's safe to assume his defeat was just one of the Brotherhood's calculated possibilities. If he hadn't been killed, they would have soon taken the device and conducted their experiments elsewhere. Indeed, looking at how the traps are set, everything makes sense. Uriel doesn't think this device will give them any information about other hideouts, and Guy doesn't think so either. This device is for conducting experiments on souls. The transcendent magic the Brotherhood was researching focuses on using soul power. As the guy said, a soul can be distorted by compressed mana. If the fusion of such mana is successful, one can become stronger, but the chance of your soul and personality being broken is also high. However, souls distorted in this way react differently to such magic. If the Brotherhood was indeed conducting experiments with this device, they would have used it to create a special, distorted soul. This way, the guys could search for their hideouts based on the recommendation of such a soul for mana distortion around it. But there are no guarantees to find them using this method. Haven't they already thought of this possibility? And regarding the experiment, does Iris really intend to conduct it on a living creature? They mean that the girl should take responsibility and volunteer because she caused a lot of trouble. Iris is a dragon and her soul is different from a human's. The guy had taken care of everything in advance so Iris could relax, she thanked Guy. There's a good option since Guy also conducted soul research. This item replicates a human soul but is created with magic and is called a pseudo soul. They could try using the device on this thing. Creating a soul with magic, Reuter couldn't even imagine how to do that. Guy needed a lot of power and resources to create it, but it's better this way than using a human. According to what's written here, the compression ratio should be exactly this. If they follow these instructions, they'll get the same characteristics as other shelters. Suddenly, something unexplainable started happening. What was it? The guys watched intently. What happened? Uriel asked if the experiment had failed. Introducing mana from a special mana compression device into a magically created human pseudo-soul. If they can recreate the unique distortions of this device, they can find other Brotherhood shelters. What happened? Did the experiment fail? The girl was very curious. Magic formed in the guy's hand, and he replied, no, quite the opposite. This is the core of the pseudo-soul. All they needed was the magical distortion caused by the device. And the team managed to get it. Now they just need to find the exact same distortion. The girl didn't understand the principle behind all of this. How would they search for the distortion? They could use familiars. Guy made them specifically with the ability to search for these exact soul distortions. First, they should search the kingdom and nearby territories. Even his search methods are radically different from conventional ones, so it's unlikely they'll be that close. Therefore, they'll have to wait. And while the guys wait, maybe they should eat. Iris's eyes immediately lit up. This lunch while reading a book on magic theory. Iris replied, okay, I'll try. How's the progress on reading the magic theory book Guy gave her? She should say if there's anything she doesn't understand. Nothing special yet. The book is quite difficult, but it starts to make sense when you study the material carefully. The book he's holding is a collection of the latest magic theories. It not only highlights the differences between traditional magic, but also examines everything. Guy should listen to the detailed explanation of this book. He realized this book contained magic collections written a couple of hundred years ago. It had no theoretical errors and was the best book of its kind. It talks about the power of spells, stating that it has already reached its limit and cannot go higher. However, the guy's power surpasses everything written about it in this book. She should read carefully. Everything should be described further down. Ah, it seems she found it. The amount of mana that can be poured into a spell and recreated, this means that was once the limit. Magic is rapidly evolving. And as new theories emerge, old ones become meaningless. She understood that she used to think practice was more important, but it seems theory is also very much needed. It will be quite difficult to learn all of this and apply it in practice. The guy was curious how Iris was doing. She replied that she was fine and was currently reading the 3rd page. The third page, considering the first is the cover and the second is the table of contents, means this is a very complex book. It's an introduction to magic for beginners from the Royal Academy of Sidonia for first-grade elementary school students. So there's a school that teaches magic to kids who are just starting first grade? Well, it's a textbook from a prestigious academy. The guy wouldn't say it's easy there either. Seriously, if it's for first graders, there should be plenty of text for children her age. The familiars returned faster than Guy expected. There's a reaction here, but there's been nothing there for at least 100 years. This is the kingdom of Ordona, seemingly a state, but at the same time not. Reuter means they have a name, but the state itself has been gone for a long time. A group of bandits named it. This place is the worst in the world. Information about them doesn't leave their territory, so he can't confirm what it's like there now. Guy understood everything, then this works in their favor. Why? Because if the guys destroy everything, there won't be any international scandal. She believes that's exactly right. Neighboring states shouldn't interfere. An international scandal? Did he decide to wipe everything off the face of the earth there? Next to it is the kingdom of Sidonia. The border is this gorge. Does Guy know this place? Why does she think so? Uriel doesn't know, she just assumed. Well, maybe the guy fought there in the past, he should tell her, and was the gorge always there? But it can't be stated for sure. They say it was created by guys attacking magic, which is why it's called Guy's 12th Gorge. Alright, Guy thinks he might have overdone it a bit. Why the 12th? Are there 11 others like it? That's right, many places are named after the guy. If there's Guy's Gorge from the 1st to the 12th, it will be difficult to remember everything. Wait, what if there are 13 or more? It's the most common name in the world if the guy didn't know. Guy's Gorge, Guy's Pond, Guy's Plain. Why do they use random people's names to label things? Maybe it's because Guy himself was involved in all these places. He heard that about 200 years ago, the guy put cartographers in a difficult position with his adventures. By the way, does Guy know who his enemy was back then? If we're talking about 200 years ago, it was a dragon, he assumes. Iris knew it. Guy feels sorry for the cartographers, his magic caused them trouble. From now on, he'll try to use it more carefully. Alright, let's continue. So there's a high probability that there's a Brotherhood hideout there, and then the guys can take over the kingdom. Excellent, Reuter agrees. It's worth making it the 13th Guy's Gorge, but the girl thinks one already exists. The team prepared for the journey. All 4 of them were determined to go. Is this the kingdom of Ordona? All they can see are farmlands. That's because teleportation is forbidden here. The guys are currently about 5 kilometers from the city center. He wanted to launch a surprise attack, but plans changed. They'll get closer using stealth magic. Well, what can I say? It's pretty quiet here. They look like settlers looking for land. He doesn't even know how to describe them properly. Does he really think the Brotherhood's hideout is nearby? They wouldn't have set up a teleportation block for no reason. They must want to hide something. Don't let your guard down. Let him see how much is left here. The man apologizes, saying if he doesn't want to work, then he'll become fertilizer. Reuter takes back her words. It's not that quiet here. It seems like slave labor is rampant, and those working now could very well be kidnapped people. The guy wants to say that these could have been settlers, but the Brotherhood took control of them. No, they can't let people who invented sweets be tormented. Iris asks for permission to beat him up. If they kill him, their cover will be blown. It's better to just knock him out. Yes, he wants to be turned into fertilizer. If this really is the Brotherhood, then the guys will free them by destroying the hideout. Is this the place his familiar pointed to, and there's a person inside whose soul is distorted by the same device? It seems there can be no mistake. The 2 guarding the gates are battle mages, and very powerful ones at that. That's exactly why their disguise won't work anymore. So what are they going to do? It's pretty obvious. The guys will declare war on them, blocking teleportation. Guy used a teleportation block exactly like the one at the kingdom's entrance, but his prevents teleportation out, not in. Their goal is to gather information and to ensure no one escapes. All escape routes must be cut off. It turns out this hideout also has underground passages, which were included in the spell's area of effect. What a barrier. Did they do this? This is an enemy attack. The order was given to kill them all. Are they seriously just going to come and kill the guys? How will they find out the reason for the attack? The Brotherhood never had good intentions from the start. They're used to such assaults. They're using magic, a lightning ball, an ice explosion, a blazing arrow. Reuter announced he would handle them. The young man swung his weapon using Reuter's sword techniques, a lightning strike. Did this guy just cut through their magic? The hooded figures were very surprised. He dispelled their magic with a single strike. This is what happens when there's a huge difference in power. He's an 11th rank swordsman. The enemies decided to retreat. Guy was very surprised. By ordering a retreat, it means they guard their information very carefully. The enemies won't just leave that easily. This is long-range magic, and it won't forgive those who torment people making sweets. A meteor fall, Iris's flame. The man was struck by the girl's attack. Are they sure they're holding back their power? Give them another minute and they'll leave no stone unturned here. If possible, they should take the enemies captive. Guy would be grateful for any information. If the situation allows, the girl will do it, but it's important to know that suicide is part of the Brotherhood's policy. Seriously, they're all ready to kill themselves. They've been brainwashed and stripped of their own will. Their very existence is just about obeying rules. I see, so if they knew they couldn't escape, they would kill themselves, right? Then we should prepare in advance so they don't destroy anything. Is that a meteor fall? Yes, but Guy rewrote the formula and slightly modified it. Is that freezing magic? Not exactly. Guy just made it so the meteor fall would freeze the impact site. The four guys stood close to each other when the magic was used. When people and things are frozen, they become easier to damage and break, and it gets chilly. But Reuters says the girl just doesn't have much muscle. Is this enemy transmission magic? It seems the enemy decided to use transmission magic, a communication transmission. For them, no, Guy just intercepted the signal. Negotiations are also information, after all. Are all the materials classified? Yes, now in case anything happens, information leakage is minimized. So someone is still alive after all. Yes, they managed to block the freezing, and if that's the case, they're quite strong and competent. But their professionalism wouldn't allow them to use transmission so carelessly. So their message, it's just a trap. Guy found the magic of several more people below, but their power is much higher than those they just encountered. There's also someone with distorted mana. Perhaps this is who the guys are looking for. What will they do? The guy suggests accepting their invitation. There's a passage right here, and the team moved forward. Whoa, everything's frozen here. Hey, even the floor is frozen and slippery. If you're good at ice skating, you can do it just like Iris. How will the girl stop now? Iris realized the situation and screamed. Then she yelped. The fall was painful. The girl started worrying about Iris. She began to curse, saying it was very painful and that attacking without warning was just a cowardly act. It looks like Iris flew right into their trap. Is she really in that much pain? No, not that much, but it's still unpleasant. That was a direct hit though. How is Iris still alive? Maybe a protective barrier. The trap didn't work right then. Guy hopes they have secret materials with them. Damn it. He knew the guys were after information, so why not try to take it from the enemy himself? But they need to consider that if they don't defeat all of them, they won't get anything. Offhand, there are about 50 enemies here. If the odds aren't in their favor, they'll burn any material and information, or they could do that. Alright, if the enemy won't give up the information, Guy will take it himself. Item transfer. Damn it, Guy caught the box and thanked them. How could such a protective barrier be broken so easily, and he's using such a powerful item movement along with the barrier's destruction? Nothing special, it's just that the opponents were too weak, damn it. The commander simply told them to kill them. As the overseer of this shelter, he allowed his subordinates to take on a demigod form, and they understood. This mana is so terrifying it looks familiar. There's no mistake, this is transcendent magic. Guy wants to learn more and more about them. Just let them kill them. As the overseer of this shelter, he allowed his subordinates to take on a demigod form, and they all understood. Uriel felt a significant increase in mana. Reuters asked the guy if that was normal. It seems they want to increase their power using transcendent magic, so we can observe. Guy and his allies prepared for battle against the hooded figures. He asked Iris if they reminded her of anyone. The girl replied, demons. What demons? In this world there are beings called demons. Although they look like humans, their way of thinking is different. They are completely hostile to others and their origin is still unknown. So demons appear because of something he doesn't know. They are a bit different from all the demons Guy has fought before. He'll need to find traces of transcendent magic here. In any case, to search they first need to calm everyone down, right? But there are quite a few here, commendable. No one ran away. Damn, was he absorbed? The man became worried. Transcendent magic used to increase power, alters the soul. Apparently this guy's soul couldn't handle it, he keeps changing. What will happen to him next? It's what Uriel is thinking about. It seems she knows more about it. Some strange dark creature appeared with long horns on its head, fangs, and wide wings on its back. Transcendent magic merged with his soul. It seems that yes, this is how demons are created. Uriel was right. It seems now is not the time for contemplation. Guy agreed, but despite his appearance, the guy isn't very strong, is he? Oh, it seems that when you can't maintain your sanity during transformation, what's the point of the action if you end up attacking allies? Although, it seems this can be attributed to the difficulty of using transcendent magic. Maybe Guy should return from his thoughts to the others. Another failure clause, he controls transcendent magic to alter and reshape. The man activated his magic and began his attack on the opponents. He apologized for making them wait, but in return, he showed Guy something very interesting. Now, he'll demonstrate his abilities in battle. The guy can't wait. Does Guy really want this? Guy is strong, but the number of opponents. Oh, right, no need to worry, he dispelled their barrier. If they turn out to be stronger, the guys will escape. So that's it, Guy is quite cautious. He says he's looking forward to fighting the opponent. Guy must have gone completely crazy with fear if he's saying that. Well, if that's the case, there's nothing to be done. He'll make everyone pay for invading this place. The barrier was quite strong. Seriously, Guy thought the opponent was stronger, but he shouldn't underestimate him. He managed to slightly penetrate the guy's barrier, even if it took him a long time. Not bad. I wonder how long his composure will last. Maybe Guy should strengthen the barrier. Oh, why? But honestly, the guy is disappointed. What disappointed? Guy always thought of transcendent magic as a tool capable of enhancing magic, but they're just using it as a weapon. Not that it's bad, but if this is their maximum level of enhancement, then regular magic would be even better. So she's disappointed because their enemies are weak. Yes, because from the very beginning, Guy had high hopes for transcendent magic. It seems now isn't the best time for discussions. But he also has that kind of magic. Why can't he become stronger than them? Right, what an idiot. Guy completely forgot about that. Then he wants to try to imitate them. It was something like that. The opponents saw the guy's magic and were astonished. What? And Guy will become normal afterward, right? Especially since it will be very inconvenient for him to use that hand in everyday life later on. Many functions of the human body are supported by magic, and magic consists of mana. It seems that the Brotherhood reduces mana reserves when distorting the soul, thereby allowing transcendent magic to consume a part of the soul and strengthen the body. But why give up the soul when you can give up mana? If you restore the flow of mana in the body, the transformation will be undone. Understood. Interesting. Just as Guy thought, he still has much to learn about magic. A demigod? Who exactly is he? Alright, never mind. Now the guy is sure that he cannot be left alive. The barrier is destroyed. Let them kill him and take what he stole. A crowd of hooded figures gathered in a circle and extended their hands to the center. Suddenly, a huge flash appeared, scattering the hooded figures in all directions. That was pretty weak, he thought. Is the enemy even trying to fight or what? Damn it, he wished they would just kill him instead of all attacking at once. As Guy began to understand how to use this power, the battle continued. The guy started swinging his weapon wildly, cutting his opponents to pieces. It can't be. Guy is using this power flawlessly, not a single wasted movement. No, Guy wouldn't say that. Rather, his body was just moving on its own. Wait, his body on its own. Even though Guy spent mana on the transformation and his strength increased, the transcendent magic didn't allow him to fully control it. This isn't bad if their goal is to quickly teach soldiers how to fight. The enemy is using the demigod's power flawlessly. Did he steal their technique? Does that mean he destroyed their test lab? Is that it? Are they trying to achieve the power of demigods? He understood. Apparently they didn't realize that he had no desire to explain anything to them. But now it was clear that they maintained contact with all their shelters, so he made a mental note of that information. In any case, this power wasn't as strong as Guy thought. How could that be? He finally understood everything. Did Guy learn to sense this power, and does it utterly hate humans? It hates humans. It seems this transcendent magic recognizes humans as enemies. This must be the reason why demons are hostile towards humans. Guy tried to cast spells with the transcendent magic, but for some reason, his mana and the transcendent magic's mana interfered with each other, which increased the spell casting time. Moving on its own, hostile to humans, increased spell casting time. Guy was disappointed once again. Well, Guy had already figured out most of it, so it was time to end the experiments. The demigod's power vanished. Such a pathetic fake couldn't compare to real magic. Go on, let them kill them. The hooded figures charged. This was their end. Did they really not understand that transcendent magic was controlling their opponents right now, and they were seriously using such a disadvantage in a real fight? Guy said, look at him. No, it couldn't be. Because they weren't controlling themselves, even he, with his first mark, had enough time to cast a spell. Still, using his own magic was much more pleasant. Transcendent magic was too difficult to use. Quantum explosion. How did they lose with the power of a demigod? It was simply a difference in magical knowledge, that's all. The hooded figure ordered them to stop, demanding they return what they had stolen, or he would kill Iris. Wow, he's brave to take Iris hostage. Guy had let one of them escape, but he didn't expect him to return to the battlefield. But Guy needs to pay attention to his claw. No need to worry, Iris will be fine. The enemy got angry. What were they whispering about? Didn't they realize he was about to kill their comrade? I really want to ask him if he knows who he's holding. I wonder how surprised he'd be if she transformed. Iris looked at her opponent questioningly. Why was the enemy trying to boss them around? What's wrong with them? Where's their common sense? If they don't want to cooperate, then let them reap what they sow. The opponent's nail broke. Iris announced that it hurt. By the way, what? What? She threw a grown man with no effort? What kind of monster, not a child, is she? Well, technically she is a monster, but as Guy understood, most opponents only judge her by her appearance. Iris told them to defend themselves. The girl held a weapon, swung it, and struck the opponent, attacking with all her might. What the heck? Where did Iris get so much mana? The demigod they talked about is still weaker than a dragon. So this person is the only one left alive. What will he do? Suddenly the guy realized something, this feeling. How did it happen that with the power of a demigod's the opponents lost, so he's the only one left alive? What will this person do now? It's strange, it looks like he's rushing to do something, but he doesn't feel the movement of his mana. What is he trying to do? Is he trying to lower their guard? If so, he must have an ace up his sleeve to use against them. Then Guy ordered his team to step back, and the guys understood everything. He used magic that destroyed everything in its path. A bright flash shot forward. Guy asked if everyone was okay, and they replied yes. Fortunately, everything turned out fine. What was that just now? He supposed it was a cutting spell. This attack was remarkable not so much for its power, but for its speed. Usually when casting a spell, mana moves through the body and can be noticed, but he did it in the blink of an eye. Was this also transcendent magic? Guy couldn't even remember the last time he had to dodge a spell from a mere human. This was transcendent magic, wasn't it? Why did he go silent? Maybe he's preparing another attack. Another one. He needs to be on guard and ready to dodge. They can't defend against something like that. Yes, even he couldn't defend against it. Even though Guy put up a barrier, it was shattered to pieces. Does this guy always carry that with him? Yes, because who knows when you'll be attacked, so he always carries it. Guy responded to his opponent, asking if he could show him a few more tricks like that. Spatial Spear. This spell combines two techniques, and to put it simply, not even a dragon would be left. So, what is his opponent going to do? He activated his magic and attacked his opponent, but just as Guy expected, it didn't work on him. He was able to deflect the technique with just his mana. He's strong now, and his actions are perfectly honed. Guy's spell contained a colossal amount of mana. Even though they all raised their barriers, the guys were powerless beyond that. Could it be that Guy finally had a worthy opponent? It seemed like 130 years had passed since the last one. To think all these guys lost. They called themselves demigods, but then who exactly is he? After all, unlike them, this man retained his former appearance, and yes, this power simply overflows from him. He's just terrifying. They don't know who he is, but the opponent managed to pique his interest. He shouldn't worry, he doesn't have to answer. He'll die soon anyway. The price of such power is too great. The opponent suddenly launched an attack on the team. Reiter reacted quickly and deflected the attack with his sword. Damn it, what the heck, that scoundrel. The opponent hit a barrier during the attack. Damn, he couldn't wound them, but the barrier cracked. And he's strong, much stronger than a demigod. The opponent isn't even using transcendent magic, but he can block attacks. While Guy defends with a barrier, he tries to kill him without a spell, but even the lack of oxygen or mana absorption has no effect on him. The guys started to worry about Guy, but he told the three of them not to interfere. Iris was ordered to transform into a dragon, pick up the others, and fly away. They needed to get as far away from him as possible. Uriel apologized for being a burden, and Reuter also apologized for being too weak in this fight. Iris understood everything and, saluting, touched her hand to her head. They were flying away. The group ascended into the air and told Guy to be careful. Those who knew about transcendent magic besides them had to die. Guy said he couldn't let his comrades die. The battle continued. Damn it, who the hell was he anyway? Alright, then he'd have to kill Guy first. Even though Guy was good at magic, he was clearly a weakling in close combat. What did he expect from the first mark? But he shouldn't worry, Guy had long since taken care of close combat. That wasn't bad, but there was one catch. The opponent parried the attack and counterattacked, asking how Guy liked that. Guy apologized, but he had anticipated such a move. It seemed he had never fought in this form before, otherwise there was no explaining why he was defending with such power. It looked like transcendent magic wasn't all powerful after all. Damn, Guy was annoying, but now he wouldn't escape. What was he talking about? Guy had only bought time for Iris and the others to escape. Why did the opponent think the guy wanted to escape too? He needed his stuff back. Guy apologized, but they were in his magic storage. Excellence, the opponent could take them after Guy's death. He thought it would work out. Even if the guy died, his opponent wouldn't be able to break through his barrier. This person clearly wanted to take what Guy had taken, so it must be very important, but he wasn't even trying to take it from him. What was the opponent planning? Well, what was he waiting for? Or did the guy think he could hack into Guy's storage? Or did he think it would be easier to do once the guy was dead? Guy realized he couldn't feel the presence of the others. He was very happy about that. It seemed they were already far away. It looked like Guy's friends were safe. Was that so? And what had his opponent been waiting for him? No, it just seemed like he was stalling for time. His comrades were dear to Guy. Since the guy let them go, was that true? The opponent couldn't even imagine how much. Since they had nothing left to lose, could they continue? The opponent agreed, as he had already surpassed the power of a demigod, but he was very happy about their fateful meeting, because he could fight to his heart's content. So the opponent didn't know which of them was stronger, but he suggested they fight with full power. Wow, the guy didn't expect him to be one of those who loved to fight. Wasn't Guy the same? To be honest, yes, and fighting a strong, unknown opponent brings indescribable pleasure. He told Guy not to be foolish. Guy thinks his opponent will let him keep running his mouth, but he needs to know that this man prefers killing to fighting. There's nothing more satisfying than killing your enemies. Guy knew he would attack as soon as he let his guard down, and he'd long realized that this guy enjoys killing. He wondered if all the Brotherhood members were like that. But honestly, his attack surprised Guy. He admitted that this man was clearly good at killing. He was very skilled in combat for an assassin, but his opponent wasn't just an assassin, he was simply good at everything. And now, Guy was experiencing everything his opponent was capable of. Power was already overflowing from him, and he was now certain that Guy would lose. Then the man began to attack, and their battle continued. Guy was ready to parry the assault. Soul-shattering magic and a series of other blows followed. His opponent was too confident in his abilities. If Guy were in his shoes, he wouldn't think that becoming a little stronger would guarantee killing his enemy. There's no need to worry, Guy will definitely die. Even he can't withstand the opponent's magic because there's no way to protect one's soul. The man went on the offensive. Guy reached out to block it, stopping his opponent's fist. That's impossible. Where's Guy's death? His attacks are getting weaker and weaker. As for his opponent's strength, it seems he can't use many spells in a row, so his time is running out, right, Guy? Damn it, this guy is strong in a one-on-one fight, but he's still just an ordinary assassin, but Guy wants to thank him. His opponent was curious why Guy was thanking him. It was because it had been a very long time since Guy had had a battle like this. Guy raised his hand above his head and said, "All right, now it's my turn to attack." What? Don't tell me Guy prepared a spell while they were fighting. How can he be so strong with just the first mark? He thinks Guy was just buying time for his comrades to escape. This is one of the strongest destruction magic spells. After it, nothing will be left standing within a 10-kilometer radius. Atomic Blade. Now let's see if his opponent can survive it. Damn, Guy is insane. He advised his opponent to defend himself. The fight was still on. His opponent tried to reach out to defend against Guy's attack, but then he started screaming in pain as everything around them began to crumble. It had been a long time since Guy had a worthy opponent. He thanked him again, and now it was his turn to attack. Had Guy been preparing a spell the entire time, right in the middle of their fight? Guy only had the first mark, so he needed a lot of time to prepare. When he orders him to create, it was decided to send his comrades. Not only because Guy cares about them, but also to buy time. By the way, nothing will be left within a 10-kilometer radius of this spell. Guy continues to attack this man, using magic and activating the atomic blade. Now let's see if the opponent can survive this. Damn, Guy is insane, the guy told him to defend himself. The opponent stretched out his arms. Did he decide not to dodge? That's commendable. The man started screaming. Damn it, he shouldn't underestimate his opponent. He's about to show the full power of his transcendent magic. Watch closely. The opponent started breathing heavily. He said his transcendent magic was better than Guy's spells. Well, if he's asking for it, then the guy will strike with full force, and he's prepared enough spells like this. He just dealt with 10% of the power. What about 20%? Will the opponent reflect it or not? They'll find out now. Bastard, so much power. How can Guy be this strong? It's impossible. He used magic and activated an extremely powerful technique, one that destroys absolutely everything in its path. Guy's magic was so powerful that it pierced a huge section of the earth. Even the team, as they flew away from the battle site, noticed the explosion. The guys flew to the side. Wow, what a blast wave. They need to hold on tighter. Guy must have been behind that, right? Uriel wouldn't want to see this guy as an enemy. It's not even clear what's happening there. It's hard to tell from such a long distance. Maybe the guys should go back. If Guy is still fighting, maybe they can help him somehow. Uriel is all for it, but he sent the team here because they are too weak. If the guys go there, they'll die. But what about that explosion? What if it wasn't Guy's attack? The guy's face is saddened. But if Guy dies, then the girl will be free, right? Huh, what? Who's saying that? It's evil Iris. She represents the girl's true feelings and is trying to say something. These are her true feelings. The girl is a black dragon, and it's hard to believe that Iris joined the humans, but they are good. Uriel and Uriel love her. And what about Guy? Doesn't he make her study? Iris doesn't like that, but it's for the girl's own good. Anyway, if Guy dies, the girl will be free from her studies. Iris tries to object. So should Iris fly far away from here, or does she really want to study again? The girl started crying, unsure of what to choose. The group noticed something was wrong. Reuter asked her what was up and how she was feeling. With tears, Iris replied that she didn't want to study again. Suddenly, Guy appeared out of nowhere, hovering in the air and announcing his return. Iris was startled by her teacher's sudden appearance. Iris is definitely fine, that's true, but the dragon was very scared. Reuter asked the young man if he had one. Guy floated in the air using magic and confirmed that he had indeed one. That recent explosion was that Guy's doing. Yes, it was his atomic blade. The opponent started using soul destruction magic, so Guy decided to hit him with something stronger to calm him down, but he overdid it a bit, and not a speck of dust was left of that person. And the guy didn't even hit with full power. The team was very surprised by what they heard. Guy didn't hit with full power. This information was shocking. Transcendent magic draws mana from outside, as do its powers. It's a shame he hasn't mastered it perfectly. Maybe that man would have had a chance. But Guy learned that there are stronger people in the Brotherhood, so the young man plans to continue his search for magic and the Brotherhood. Guy is counting on the team's help, and they agreed that they could assist him. It doesn't matter how strong the enemies are, because for now they are human and they can't defeat Guy. But Guy replied that he is also human. Is that true? Iris always thought her teacher was some other kind of creature. Starting today, Iris will also be studying biology. She was upset, wondering why Guy was doing this to her. Now they need to report. Communication magic, right? The group is contacting the king right away, but what will they tell him? Uriel addressed his majesty and apologized for the disturbance. The girl hoped the king wasn't busy and could listen to everything she had to say. It's all right. Did something happen to the group? No, nothing urgent, but the king understood something and said, wait. Could that powerful explosion a few minutes ago have been caused by Guy? Are they currently in the kingdom of Ordona? The kingdom already knows about his destruction magic. Their intelligence works very well. The problem is something else. The group made too much noise. That's true. Guy didn't think they could cause problems for the kingdom like that. But how did they find out where the explosion was so quickly? Has the Brotherhood already noticed the young man too? Guy wants to ask the king how they found out, and Uriel repeats that he can try asking. They apologize to his majesty once more, but now the king's secret intelligence service has asked him to confirm this information. However, that's not the case. This is something new. The information didn't come from them, and the request wasn't made by the Secret Intelligence Service. It came from the Geography Department. The Geography Department. The guys have a device that maps changes when a significant landscape alteration occurs within the kingdom's territory. Just a couple of minutes ago, the device activated and marked a very large area. The king's first thought was Guy, because no one else could create such a powerful explosion. And since a new gorge appeared due to that explosion, the geographers started to think Guy had returned, because, according to them, he's the only one who always likes to make such big gorges. The king tried his best to prevent them from finding out about Guy's existence and tried to stop them, but they didn't believe him and wouldn't back down. As a result, the king had to tell everyone everything. But the king managed to convince them that if it really had been Guy, he would have died from such an explosion himself. Uriel breathed a sigh of relief. He never even knew such a device existed in the kingdom, and it's been there for at least 100 years. So they've been recording Guy's battles every time. Pretty funny, actually. We can congratulate the Guy on yet another gorge. Well, what do you say, shall we celebrate? And what does Guy think about all this? Well, Guy admits it was his magic, but no one should know about his existence. And seriously, they should stop naming gorges after Guy. It annoys him. But if he keeps blowing everything up, everyone will definitely know he's alive. In any case, if the kingdom knows, then the Brotherhood certainly does too. But then again, they would have found them sooner or later anyway. Uriel informed His Majesty that she understood. And since they've already destroyed their second hideout, does that mean they've increased security in their other locations? That's right, except their secret documents are with the Guy. Guy pulled them out of his magical storage and they floated above his hand. They were ready to tear each other apart with their bare hands for these documents, so upon arrival, Guy will begin deciphering them. He wants to prepare for the next encounter with the Brotherhood as soon as possible. By the way, the team has almost arrived. It seems the king wouldn't mind if Guy used one of his laboratories. Iris was informed that their course was the kingdom of Miles. The girl understood and replied, "Got it." The guys made a lot of noise, but the king will take care of everything. And now, it's time to open the box. The box was placed on the table, and as they began to open it, everyone gathered around, anticipating what was inside. A bright light burst forth. Iris recognized it immediately. What could it be? Oh, it's a magic circle. She started to get nervous and mumbled something. Did she guess wrong? The guy replied, "No, Iris, you got it right. It's a magic circle, but it's embedded within an object. Some parts of it are missing and others are jumbled. If they mess up the restoration, it'll blow everything to smithereens. What? It'll explode." So the cipher is a magic circle? Uriel pondered this. Iris turned and asked, "Huh?" Uriel is going to try and extract the magical formula from this circle, but it requires a lot of mana and extensive calculations. However, if she succeeds, the circle will be deciphered, and the group will gain access to the information. Oh, so that's how it is. Iris was tired of their smart talk. She couldn't understand anything on an empty stomach. They asked Uriel if she knew the Brotherhood's cipher. Unfortunately, no, Uriel didn't know it, but she had seen it a couple of times. They called it the Aegis cipher. To be more precise, as Reuter knew, it was the most complex magical cipher ever to exist. Deciphering and encrypting it took a huge amount of time and effort, which is why it earned the title of the most difficult. Guy had never even heard of it. Was he planning to study all the materials on ciphers from the last 100 years? Guy asked for all the books and records on ciphers they had. He wanted to read everything before attempting to decipher it. Since they only needed to decipher it, this one would do. It was called Brief Descriptions of the Aegis Cipher, Encryption, Decryption, and Information Compression. The author of the book was unknown, and the publisher was the Royal Aegis University. Yes, they didn't know how this cipher came about, but it was incredibly complex. For many years, no one had been able to fully master it. Only the Royal Aegis University knew the methods for its encryption and decryption. Understood, she had tried to figure it out once, but she had too little knowledge and skill. Maybe Guy would succeed, they would find out now. The text in this book felt very familiar to Guy. All right, well, where did he put it? He found it, but what was this? Wait, did Guy write this book? It seemed so. These books were absolutely identical. It was funny, there were many rumors surrounding this book, but now it was clear why the author was unknown. Guy simply didn't put his name on most of his books. Guy considered it unacceptable, as a book was merely the result of his hard work and knowledge. Why should his name be on it? So Guy can now decipher the documents, right? He apologized, but it'll be tough for him to decipher his own code. But it's worth a try. Guy stretched out his hand and used magic, activating the spell Decipher. The magic activated and the documents immediately began to decipher. Soon, everything would be clear. So, did it work? Guy deciphered the documents. He replied that he didn't know, as you should never be sure you've fully deciphered a text. Well, the sentences and words are quite readable. Guy started examining everything he managed to decipher with magic. Down here, a shelter is marked, which is where they were the first time. And what about this one? It's located right where the guys are now. Everyone started watching and asked if he had deciphered it. Did Guy succeed? It seemed so, but it wasn't a cipher, it was information compression. Still, it was difficult to decipher even though no code was used. But to decipher this cipher, the guys need a key, a special magic circle. For the documents, a circle with 1,000,000 lines worked. Guy used an arithmetic magic circle, and if he combined it with deciphering magic, it would take about 5 seconds. Guy realizes that no one alive can do that. Is that true? The dragon doesn't understand what the guys are talking about at all. Oh well, the main thing is that the document is deciphered, and it shows the locations of the Brotherhood's shelters, and they are accurate. However, Guy is more interested in something else. Where did the Brotherhood come from? That's what he wants to know most of all. The one Guy fought, it says here that he is the 8th experiment in creating a demigod. What? The 8th experiment? Does that mean there are at least 7 others like him? Yes, they conduct various experiments on people to create a demigod. Guy opened the document and examined the pages. The first experiment is soul alteration, which describes Guy and Uriel. It's the simplest and is conducted in every Brotherhood shelter. Since the guys have a map of all the shelters, Guy doesn't even know where to start. Does that mean their goal is to destroy all the shelters? Yes, that's right, but Guy would like to destroy them all simultaneously. What, simultaneously? Even though they plan to get rid of all of them, he wants to gather as much information as possible about soul alteration. Why not destroy them with magic? That would cause chaos. Other kingdoms would find out where the shot came from, and it would trigger a series of prolonged wars. Therefore, it's better to destroy them one by one. And the guys will start here. Guy pointed his finger at a spot on the document. They'll start from here, the coast of the Kingdom of Miles, the Gears branch. They have a shelter right under their noses. Yes, it seems to be on an island, so they won't have to worry about neighboring countries. It says here that it's bigger than their main hideout, so there must be something interesting there. They suggest heading out as soon as possible, and it would be best to go now, but first, they should stop by the workshop. The workshop? Guy has a workshop. I wonder what's in there. An incredible amount of national treasure, lots and lots of shiny trinkets. He guessed right, and the others were already there. The young man told Uriel and Reuter that he wanted to make weapons for them. After all, they would be facing many battles from this point on. Guy is going to personally make them weapons for battle. The young man's ally told him he was the best for that. He wanted to go straight to the Seraphim Society branch, but before doing that, they needed to prepare a few things, starting with a trip to the workshop. What a workshop? Mr. Guy's workshop. It's probably full of items of national importance, full of treasures, right? That's right, since the guys are here, they should make weapons for Uriel and Reuter. Guy had observed their fighting styles in previous battles. What, weapons for them? The girl was thrilled, exclaiming that it was simply wonderful. Excellent, both of them will become much stronger. It's great that it's Uriel and Reuter's turn now. It looks like Iris won't have to do anything for a while. Iris's face clearly showed what she was thinking. Something dangerous usually happens at moments like these. So can everyone just go right away? Maybe Iris will carry everyone again. Guy was silent at first, then sternly said, "Stop." The girl even got scared. But Iris needed to listen. If Uriel and Reuter got new weapons, they would become stronger. The girl had completely forgotten and hadn't thought about it. Guy chuckled. What had Iris forgotten? She asked again. What's? The young man repeated the question. What did Iris forget? The girl started to stammer. Well, that. Iris replied that they had agreed she would study and fulfill her promises. Oh, she actually remembered that. The girl was very sorry and apologized for destroying that strange mechanism with her sneeze. Guy chuckled and said, "Understood." It wasn't because Iris sneezed, the mechanism was just too old. It went out of control due to wear and tear. Seriously. So that's what it was. Iris breathed a sigh of relief, meaning she didn't have to study. Guy looked at her with a questioning gaze. What? Controlling magical power is important, right? Iris replied, well. This time it was an accident, but what if Iris's fire strike accidentally hit a comrade during a fight? The girl got nervous and mumbled, well, that. Besides, Iris already has great power, so if she learns to control magic, she'll significantly improve her abilities. But still, compared to weaker people training to get stronger, it will be much easier for Iris. The girl asked again, easier. Come on, Guy just has high hopes for Iris. Is that so? The guy confirmed, that's right. Iris understood everything, but she wasn't sure if she could learn, even if she tried. No need to worry, Guy already had a plan. They should change locations. Iris had a bad feeling about it. Guy sat at the table, took a sip from his cup, and said, in my opinion, Iris knows too little about basic things. Uriel probably meant that Guy himself didn't have a vast amount of knowledge, but in his case, he had spent about 100 years researching without contact with the outside world, so he was simply unaware of the events of the last 100 years. Correcting such a misunderstanding wasn't that difficult. The thing is, Guy mumbled, what is she trying to say? Uriel believed that Lord Guy lacked knowledge not only because he didn't know about recent events. He asked, is that true? How to put it, the guy had a different perception of people. It sounded abstract, but his thoughts were clear. To give an example, a person's elbow joint only bends inward, right? That's correct. What was Uriel getting at with all this? But Lord Guy probably thinks that if you try hard enough, you can bend it outward too. Isn't that so? It might hurt a little, but perhaps a guy could break and bend his arm with magic. Normally, people don't do that, and it's not a little painful. They say experienced spies can dislocate all the joints in their body. That goes beyond common sense, doesn't it? Guy asked. Is that true? Reiter believed it was. She thought that this unconventional thinking was what made Guy so strong, and there was something respectable about it. But now the guy was confused. Was she criticizing him or praising him? In any case, he wanted to say that Iris should study basic knowledge better. Iris sighed, so that's what the teacher was getting at. She thought the conversation had already moved on. Guy believes they should start with math, or rather arithmetic. Oh right, there are a few principles that form the basis of magic, but arithmetic is the most closely related to it. The amount of magical power used to control magic, the output power derived from that amount of force. Magic consists of a countless intertwining of numbers, and it's important to get used to converting magical power into numbers. Understood, this is very insightful. Uriel liked her ally's explanation. Let's say a spell requires 50 units of magical power, but you only use 40. In Iris's case, she adds and uses about 30. Yes, exactly, that's why the magic goes out of control. But in reality, Iris uses about 300. Guy should slow down. Iris is already overwhelmed, and they haven't even started yet, just the very basics. The young man crossed his arms and asked Iris if she knew her numbers. She knows them, they're what you use to count food. Then Iris should try to solve this. Guy unfolded a piece of paper and held it in front of him. A simple equation was written on it. Iris started examining the paper and asked what the little cross was. Guy looked sad and Reuter laughed. Right, the little cross. Uriel explained that it wasn't a cross but a plus. The girl asked again, a plus? Iris understood, it's called addition. And she understands it, of course, a dragon would know that. The young man asked, well then Iris understands what this means. The meaning of this problem, the girl began to think, if you add 5 and 6 that would mean. She asked a question to better understand, if I have 5 and 6 buns, how many will there be altogether? Is that how the problem sounds? Guy was silent at first, then replied that she was correct. She was delighted, but what would the answer be? If you add 5 and 6, how many buns will there be? She hummed and repeated the problem. I have 5 buns and I need to add 6 more. Iris hummed again. Iris replied that if she ate them, there would be 0 buns left. An awkward silence followed. The young man explained that she shouldn't eat them while counting. Iris asked, oh, I can't eat them. The question is how many buns there were before she ate them. Nobody says things like that in an addition answer. Iris was upset that they couldn't eat the buns, but Uriel tried to reassure her, saying no, they could eat them after she counted them. The girl started thinking and mumbling something, trying to count on her fingers while everyone waited for her answer. Then Iris understood something and wrote down the answer, then handed over a piece of paper with the problem written on it and said, here. So Iris didn't have enough fingers. She asked what was wrong if it wasn't correct, but Uriel said the answer needed to be written as a number. All right, Iris has 5 buns, and if you add 6 more, how many will there be in total? Uriel held up all the fingers on both her hands and Reuter added one more. The girl looked at it, wondering what the answer was. Then it dawned on Iris the answer would be 11. Everyone was happy that she managed to solve the problem. It was correct. Okay, it seems Iris is starting to grasp math a little. When she understands, everything becomes more fun, right? Yes, probably. Guy folded his arms on the table and said, multiplication. Multiplication is next. Uriel was indignant, saying they were moving to multiplication so suddenly. Wouldn't it be better to explain multiplication more visually? Who would have thought teaching a dragon arithmetic would be so difficult? This might be one of the most challenging tasks in the history of magical education. It seemed something had clicked for him. Whether Iris learned magic would greatly impact their team's overall combat power. If this succeeds, it will be a huge leap forward, so it's worth trying. Reuter said it was hopeless. The guy wouldn't listen to them at all and would teach his own way. Guy pulled out a board and told Iris that this was multiplication. She mumbled and looked at the problem. What if you multiply 5 by 5, not just by, but multiply? You need to multiply 5 by 5. If you imagine there are 5 apples on one tree and there are 5 trees, how many apples will there be in total? Apples. But there are no apple trees. Phew, Guy thought so. The guy had apple seeds in his hand. Now Guy will plant them in the ground, and he used magic to accelerate their growth. Shoots began to sprout and the kids noticed it. No way, Iris asked, what is that? Apples isn't accelerated growth high-level control magic. It requires precise control of magical power. Usually, it's used over several weeks, but Guy applied it so quickly. So he just improved his magic, and the guys were surprised. Is that all? Iris now had to answer if she knew him, and the girl said the answer was 25. That's right, Reuter said. See, she can do anything. The girl was thrilled and cheered, happy to be praised. Now for the next example, could the girl solve this one? It was also a multiplication problem. So 4 trees with 7 apples each. Yes, that's right, but there are only 5 apples on them. The guy understood, reached out his hand to use magic, gasped, and told Iris to wait a minute. He then pulled out his weapon and used magic to adjust the problem, making it easier for Iris to solve. Guy asked, is that better? How many apples will there be? Iris turned around with an apple in her mouth and said, 27. What was in Iris's mouth? It was an apple, but she needed to state the number of apples before she ate them. So how many would there be? There were 27 apples on the trees and the girl ate one. Iris gave the answer, there are 28. That was correct, and the team was happy for the dragon. Well, in short, Guy realized that teaching Iris arithmetic wouldn't be easy. But haste makes waste. If Iris mastered magic control, she would become invincible. Maybe he could develop magic for automatic arithmetic learning. Well, there was nothing for it. Guy said he would have to stick to the original plan. He needed to start by crafting weapons for Uriel and Reuter, and the guy was determined.